Welcome to Bad First Impression, the podcast about movies and where we meet them. We are kind of embarking on a new, what I hope will become a bit of a new norm here. So, last week you would have seen the kind of announcement, clarification on our first full themed season, covering every theatrical, well, some not theatrically released, Lord of the Rings projects. With our co-host Carrie Eng. This episode is a follow-up. It's a follow-up on some interests we've had, not necessarily on my part, but on my guest Alex Campo's part, who is a fixture on the show, and has brought this interest in basically almost from the start. This is a running
kind of
theme of the show.
Unavoidable discussion topic. Every single time I'm going to be on here, I'm going to be mentioning Nic Cage in some way.
Yes, you famously have seen every Nic Cage movie.
I've seen every film credit and every director credit of his, which is only one.
Does he have any TV credits?
Well, yes, he does.
Like early.
But only like as self.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've seen every Nic Cage project. This is an ongoing project that when a new one comes out, you go out of your way to see it.
Yes.
By the time this comes out, I think it'll be 2 weeks ago, Nic Cage was, as in like featured heavily in the marketing, at the head of promoting a new movie, a new horror film called Longlegs, directed by Oz Perkins, the son of noted actor Anthony Perkins.
Yes.
So I basically, as soon as I heard that this movie was happening, I wanted to do an episode on it.
Mm-hmm.
As kind of a pitch to whenever they come out, we'll cover a new Nic Cage movie. And we'll discuss what the parameters of that are a little bit as the episode kind of unfurls.
There are a lot of those.
Well, yeah, you would know better than most that like committing to making any commitment that involves the word every and Nic Cage can be quite overwhelming.
I think he did 6 last year, so yeah,
yes.
There's a lot.
And there was some indication that he might slow down, but then honestly, the months since then have not really indicated any intentionality behind that.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get fully into Longlegs, there's a couple things I want to bring up. One, since we've started the show and you've been on, because your first episode was for a Nic Cage movie, the extremely underrated, sometimes maligned, sometimes understood film, Bad Lieutenant: Port of Call, New Orleans. I will say fairly, one of the worst titles for a movie I can possibly imagine.
It's one of my favorite movies of his, though.
It is one of mine as well.
Yeah.
It cannot be understated how bad that title is. That's a really bad movie. Like from a marketing standpoint, I'm like, that's so many words.
So you're right. That is where we started because that was the first episode I came on.
That's the first episode you came on. And we talked about that movie. We talked about your Cage project, which has become an ongoing subject in episodes where you appear.
Yes.
We've actually missed a new release of Cage's since that point. The film is called Arcadian. I haven't seen it. You have.
I have seen Arcadian.
Do you want to talk me through a little bit about why you and I kind of we actually really briefly discussed doing an Arcadian episode?
Yes.
And then like dumb things like scheduling mishaps.
Well, I mean, really on paper, if we're going to be real transparent, I got a stomach virus the day we were going to be shooting.
Yeah, you got sick.
Or going to the theater.
You got sick. I think we ended up doing American Movie that week because we're like, whatever, let's just do it. Yeah. Let's just do something easy that we both know and love.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of, after you had seen it, you said, I'm kind of glad we didn't do an episode on that.
Yeah,
why?
I mean, I don't want to say like I don't want to trash the movie at all. It's like actually got some really cool ideas. There's some really cool horror elements in it. Nic Cage isn't really in that many horror films, and him being in 2 this year is a really cool.
It's notable.
It's notable for sure. And he is a producer on both of them. I think he might have been an executive producer on Arcadian, but he's producing on both of them. And there are some interesting elements in it, but it's just like, I don't know. It seems a little more derivative of other things and a little too stylized for something that should be simple. I think something that kind of runs into that movie is like it works from being like quiet and locked off and simple, but the entire movie is shaky cam. So
Mhm.
there's kind of like this mismatch of elements of how it's presented to what the story is. I feel like it's just not quite uh, working as a cohesive thing. And also, it's like Nick Cage isn't really in it that much. It's more so about like a brotherhood coming of age story
Yeah.
between two brothers who grew up at the end of the world. That's kind of a cool movie. It's just
It sounds like it's not a bad
it's not
pitch,
a bad movie.
and
It's
it
not a
sounds
bad
like you
pitch. It's
kinda
just
like
not.
it. It's
I
just
do like it,
uh,
and there's like cool horror monster stuff in it that I really like.
yes.
And I really can recommend. But it's just not like it's not a Nick Cage film.
I understand what you mean, and he seems to function in 2 modes these days, where one, he is working with often kind of younger blossoming filmmakers, people who are kind of at the outset of what they're doing as an artist and lending a little bit of legitimacy to the production. We saw that actually his latest like big release was Dream Scenario,
Mhm.
which had kind of just come out around the time we did that Bad Lieutenant episode.
Yes.
And we discussed that then, and the probably the highest profile one recently was Pig, movie that a lot of people
Oh
really like.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mandy, I feel like kind of falls into the same bucket of like, oh, here's like a new guy who's developing his thing as a director.
Yeah.
I will be his muse for him to basically use me as like something to center a interesting visual motif around.
I mean, I can pull out the knowledge here and point out that there were a couple other movies that even just last year that are trying to be unique from smaller directors.
Mhm.
One no one ever heard of called Butcher's Crossing. And the premise of this movie is that
I
he
think you bring
plays
up Butcher's Crossing a fair amount.
because I was looking for that for a long time because that was like one of those movies that just like wasn't getting released and it was supposed to
Mhm.
come out in like 2021 or something like that and it came out last year. Um, and that's a movie where he plays like one of the last buffalo hunters, and he's trying
Mhm.
to get all the skins that he needs for the season, and he ends up getting brain worms from the raw buffalo meat, and it's kind of a really cool. The way that that's stylized is actually really really cool, but it's like a cool like I wouldn't say horror elements, but definitely some thriller elements. And this guy suffering from not dysentery, but trichinosis or whatever
Yeah.
would be mad cow disease.
I didn't know that was what that's about. But that sounds like it's kind of melding the two modes. Like I said, he's working with a young auteur who's
Yeah.
kind of trying to look for something to anchor an interesting like visual language
For
on.
sure.
Or
And you brought up Mandy before, which is like I don't think there's a skin tone in that movie. It's all pink.
that movie looks insane. Like
I love it.
it feels insane while you're watching it.
Yeah.
There's that, and then there is the kind of red boxy direct to video. They almost kind like what we currently think of as like a Netflix action movie, something like Extraction.
Like last year, he was in a film called Retirement Plan.
Yes.
You ever heard of that?
I've literally not heard of this one.
Oh
No.
yeah, no. So that one he's
Came out last year.
came out last year. He plays get this, an agent who's coming out of retirement for one last gig.
Sounds like it'll go well. Yeah, that's
Yeah, and it was one of those movies where I think I got maybe 60 minutes into it before I realized it's a comedy.
Oh, like it's just like
not funny.
but like it's attempting jokes that you like didn't even
I didn't realize they were
register.
supposed to be jokes.
You didn't
yeah.
register that they
But
were
then
trying to be
there was
funny.
like one joke that was actually really funny, and I'm like, oh, this was supposed to be funny the whole time. It's
Yeah.
Jackie Earle Haley, who does a really good is a really good villain in everything he's in. But like he's in this and he's just coming off as a villain. He's not coming off as
Yeah.
a comedic villain.
Yeah.
Until
So
you realize they put him in the wide shot where he's next to Ron Perlman, who's supposed to like be 2 feet taller than him. It's like, oh, that's supposed to be funny.
that's such a devastating one where you're like, oh, it's not even that like the jokes were failing. They didn't
Yeah.
register as jokes. That's
it was
crazy.
unfortunate.
So those are kind of the two he existed. It sounds like Arcadian, while not a bad movie, is kind of functioning in that other mode of his, right? A
Mhm.
lower profile, a movie that is not even really aiming for mainstream success in the same way that something like Dream Scenario, which received a wide release,
Yes.
is aiming for. Longlegs, which is doing very well, is aiming for. Pig, I feel like has like an asterisk because it was like a tail end of COVID release, I think.
Yeah.
So there was, it was successful in its way.
I think Pig worked because You've seen Pig, right?
I've seen Pig. Yeah.
So when you watch Pig, I'm not going to spoil Pig because it's amazing. Everybody should watch it.
You should go see. And on the topic of spoilers, Longlegs is a new release, so we're not going to make fun of you like we usually do here.
Yep.
We're going to have a brief touch on it, and then when we get to the point where we are going to talk about important plot points in Longlegs, we're going to give you an explicit spoiler warning right here. Please don't listen anymore if you haven't seen Longlegs and intend to. So don't yell at me if you get it spoiled from me, because you're being warned really explicitly here, and then you will again later, immediately before we start giving those spoilers.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
I want to touch on Pig. Yeah. So Pig, I think, worked from coming around the time of Nic Cage was starting to do a lot more artsier stuff in that time period. So for a lot of people, including myself, when I first heard of Pig, I expected it to be a movie of him like that was going to feature a scene of him hovering over some dude, punching him in the face, going, "Where's my fucking pig?"
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be that kind of movie.
And it's not really. That's
a movie that's a movie about profound sadness.
No, that movie actually pushes it up against the point where you think that's going to happen, and then draws it back in a really interesting way.
Yep.
So we didn't do an episode on Arcadian. So right off the bat, we're starting this with an imperfect record, right?
Okay.
I have no problem with that. I don't. Do you feel? Let me ask you this: do you feel any compulsion to go back and cover Arcadian?
No, because you're just gonna say it's a quiet place, but not as good. That's what you're gonna say.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So not necessarily glad we didn't do it, but it sounds like this is maybe a better inauguration of this tradition.
What a movie to start with.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's get into kind of the knowledge of Longlegs beforehand,
because that's all kind of how into this movie,
and how the marketing existed prior to the release, and then maybe we can get a little bit about how that has expanded since the movie's release and like at its scale, very good success.
Yeah.
So this is a movie that there was a lot of that. Sometimes they'll do the pre-release. You don't watch it if you have a heart condition. This is the scariest movie. You know, that there was that attitude around it. People are having panic attacks.
I'm surprised I didn't see the Paranormal Activity audience shots.
Yeah, it was that blunt. And when we went to go see this, we saw this about a week before the wide release. It was so funny. They're like with a pre-filmed intro by director Oz Perkins that was maybe 1 minute long of him just sitting in a chair. You know, it's so funny. The second we got out, I opened up Instagram and I saw him and Micah Monroe and Blair Underwood and Nicolas Cage in person at the premiere in LA. I'm like, oh, everybody just had the better version of it.
Yeah.
It was still an excellent screen. We saw it at the IFC Center, a theater you'd never been to before.
I had never been there before.
Inappropriately kind of grungy, like beloved New York movie house.
It was in 35 millimeter.
In 35 millimeter, which was highlighted.
Yep.
I did appreciate the grain on this movie.
I loved it. I loved how this movie looked.
Yeah, which is not how it's going to be released wide. Like most people are not going to see it that way, which is a shame because I think it really contributes to
its constant movement.
The ideas that this movie is trying to evoke, basically. So we saw this, and I went in with that preparation that this is gonna be the scariest fucking thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And Oz Perkins highlights that in his little intro. He's sitting there and with like a little bit of a knowing smirk on his face is like, so prepare to sit down and watch one of the scariest movies of this decade.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of, he's being a little bit of a stinker. You know, he's being
a shithead.
He's doing a bit.
He's doing an Alfred Hitchcock bit. That's what he's doing.
And I think all of that, one, I'm going to tell you, I don't seem to be totally in line with the consensus on this.
Okay.
I wasn't in this movie like digging my fingers into the arm. This is not the scariest horror movie I've ever seen. It wasn't even particularly intense in terms of what you actually see.
Oh, okay.
That's what I mean is that like
this is a little bit of disagreement there because I do feel it was very scary, but not in the way that people on, I'm sure reviews are coming out now where people are like, that wasn't fucking scary. That there was, it's not that kind of scary movie. It's more of like, it's a movie with nonstop dread.
Yes, it is just a kind of,
And you know, with the 35 millimeter screening, there are some cool things that come up visually. It's like especially that whole opening sequence is so like this is a really cool, visually interesting horror film. And then 5 minutes later, you then end up spending the next 100 minutes just going, oh God, oh fuck, what do we even do here? It's like just
Yeah.
dread. It's like constant. What can you even possibly do to stop him?
The-
It's like spending 3 minutes on Twitter.
But what else is it? So President Bush was in the news. I always jump right into my Jay Leno impression. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
It is a what I would say is that the tension never stops ratcheting.
Yes.
It's like somebody has gone in for a purple nurple, and when they hit 360 degrees, their wrist just continued to twist, and it keeps cranking over and
Mhm.
over and over again, and it explodes,
Mhm.
eventually. But I wasn't in the way that some horror movies that are really intense.
Yeah.
I wasn't like it's not as scary. I wasn't like hiding, and like looking through my finger.
Oh,
It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
that type of scary to
Okay.
me, I guess. I do think that this is a tremendously successful movie about like just creeping dread. About it is an unrelenting.
I think that's why it works. Is
Yeah.
you know, especially because this is a super wide scope film, and with the added green that you're getting constant movement all over the frame, and the set and the lighting are done in such a way where it's like you have these dark corners in every single wide shot, and everything's a wide shot in this movie. So, and everything is framed in a way where you're just expecting something to walk by in the background. You just see there's just this empty space. It's like, what the hell's going to happen back there? It's just like framed in a way where you're primed to be looking for something that may or may not actually be there. And that's the kind of scariest thing for me. We've talked about it in the past. I'm going to compare this. This is a little unhinged. I'm even comparing this to
Sure.
this movie. I've talked to you about how much I love the movie Malignant.
Malignant, one of this podcast beloved like causes.
Before I knew what Malignant was, before I realized what kind of movie Malignant actually was, I was in love with the set design, because that is a perfect horror film house with long hallways in the background of every shot. That's the kind of thing I love in horror, is the dread of what could possibly happen, not the jump into frame kind of stuff.
Yeah, where it establishes a space that is not specifically familiar to you, but you recognize enough hallmarks about it that for the duration of the movie can feel very personal to you.
Yes.
Malignant is very good at that.
Yes.
Malignant has
and Longlegs is like that as well, where every shot has got a doorway on one side and a window on the other, just for you to be looking around and just
so you know exactly how far you are from any theoretical escape. If something jumped out at you, how far would you have to travel to get to it?
Because Micah Monroe's in both projects. Have you seen It Follows?
I've actually not seen
It Follows is another movie where you're just constantly looking in the background, and just because of the context of the film, you have to be looking in the background the whole time. And that's just, I don't know, just a funny thing that's in common with the two of these is I just found myself looking around the frame the entire time I was watching the movie.
Yes, this is a movie that is not found footage. It's not specifically true crime, but I think it is in some ways about our relationship to true crime.
Yeah. Longlegs, you mean?
Longlegs, yes. I just recently watched the Japanese found footage film Noroi the Curse, which I don't know if you've ever seen.
I've never heard of it.
It's an excellent movie about that like is almost like a compilation film of like news programs and like abandoned footage, and it kind of builds to a conclusion through like footage that was hidden during a police investigation or something like that.
That's so cool.
It's an excellent movie, and it has this kind of similar. It's sometimes literally characters will be like, "Wait, play the tape back," and you watch the same footage you just watched in slow motion, but like having been given a glimpse of something in the background, now you're like being brought through the experience of looking very specifically for something. I'll make sure to
the Conversation or Blowout, something like that. I love
yes,
that
it is
The
about
Conversation is one of my favorite movies.
Yes, it is kind of a movie about the the editing and like inferring, like in some ways it's a little bit about like the movie making process.
Can you tell I'm a professional video editor that my favorite movies are about audio and video editing?
Yes. I think that if you watch Noroi, this would probably kind of enter the canon for you.
That's so funny.
But yeah, it's a movie that is about our fixation on minute details
Mhm.
and how that can be instrumental in solving a problem sometimes. And B is also a like can sometimes cause us to just waste our own lives and time.
Mhm.
There's another movie that came out this year. It was released wide this year.
Okay.
It's my probably my favorite movie of the year. It's called I Saw the TV Glow by director Jane Schoenberg.
Mhm.
Um, that movie is also kind of about having a fixation on media and allowing that fixation and the value that you place on your relationship to it to justify to yourself why you're wasting your own life, basically. It's
Too real.
it's yes, it is it's not the easiest movie to watch.
Gotcha.
Um, but no, yeah, I think that Longlegs is so efficiently and like not many movies can continually stay this tense for this long. Honestly,
It is constant tension.
I think it's rare for a horror movie to do that. Honestly, the only like when I think of like other movies that do this sort of thing, I'm thinking of like Uncut Gems, basically, like
Or like
something just
something like Blue Ruin or something.
yes
Or,
that you
yeah.
just your heart rate never goes down; it only stays the same or goes up.
Yeah.
It is an almost like physically exhausting experience to
Yeah.
watch. So before we go into like spoiler specific discussion
Mhm.
of Longlegs, I want to talk a little bit about Nic Cage's.
Okay.
Why is it interesting to us that this is a project he's involved in, aside from the fact that it's a very big outsized character?
Yeah.
Before we get into spoilers, I don't want to like describe all that too much.
Well, that's the
But
thing about the marketing is like his name is marketed, and meanwhile he does not appear in any of the marketing.
yes,
He
yeah,
is not in any of the trailers. He is not on the posters, but his name is there.
yeah.
Very intentionally, of course. But
He is the most. Who's the big?
it's a very tight-lipped marketing.
Well, that's the thing is
Yeah.
like, who's the biggest star in this movie besides Nic Cage? Is it Alicia Witt? And no offense to Alicia Witt,
Yeah.
but like she's not
not
exactly
her
an
name's not
A-list
on the
movie
poster
star.
either.
No, exactly. I want to talk a little bit about like what is the Nicolas Cage kind of like horror canon? Like what like if you're gonna look down like because obviously
Yeah,
you know
we've talked
this
about
this is
this
so funny
before.
actually because we were playing
Yeah.
Cinematrix the other day.
Yeah.
And in our group chat afterwards, we're like talking about it afterwards.
Yeah.
One of the cross sections was Nicolas Cage and horror.
Yeah.
And as I was doing it, I was like, there are so many of his movies that are they're definitely not horror movies, but they are adjacent to it or heavily use like horrific, like elements and themes to it.
Mhm.
In your opinion, with the narrowest definition of what a horror movie is, what is Nicolas Cage's horror resume?
I mean, obviously, Longlegs, Arcadian, 2 horror films this year. God, I wouldn't call. I mean, I'm sure someone would call Renfield a horror movie. It's definitely not.
Yeah. Well,
Someone
that was
would
one of
call-
them. I was like, is that a horror? I
It's
don't
like
know.
right. It's like someone's going to call Ghost Rider a horror movie. Ghost Rider 2 maybe because
Mhm.
Ghost Rider 2 is really cool. I don't know if you've seen that one. Ghost Rider 2 rules.
I think
it's like a super religious take on
Yes.
Ghost Rider. Is awesome.
I just took like a guess.
Yeah.
By the way, and Cinematrix let me use Bringing Out the Dead as a
That's
as a
not
horror
a horror
movie.
movie. Oh,
But
you know
that's the
why?
thing.
It's because there's a ghost in it. Maybe.
So I
Yeah.
guess that's the thing is that
Yeah.
right? Like it's
I
I would be really interested to see what the Cinematrix
I
answer.
used the
what
movie
all
Pay
the
the Ghost, which takes place on Halloween, and that was my guess.
Okay.
I got
cool.
1% because no one's ever seen it. Because
I saw you got literally a couple 0%.
I got
'cause you're a
0%.
freak.
Okay, well, I've seen every one of his movies, and one of them I used was this grotesque, horrible. I have no money, so I'm going to be in this horrible fetish film.
Mhm.
One that's called Between Worlds, which I never want to think about that movie again because it's literally a fetish film, and I can't.
Okay. Cool.
We're done.
You don't want to recommend. We don't want to like ping
We're
it
not
here.
gonna
So
recommend
like
that one.
recommended it.
The other one I used though that was also 0% was this one called Outcast, which no one's ever seen.
Mhm.
It's got him and Hayden Christensen. Surprising, no one's seen it. They play God, what are they, Crusaders or something? The only thing I remember about that movie is that it was edited by the same guy who edited Taken 3, And you know that scene where Liam Neeson jumps over the fence and it's 17 shots cut together within 10 seconds? The entire movie is shot like that. This guy is like, I have this from every single angle. I'm going to use every single angle in every single
But that would
scene.
be like, at that point, I'm like,
it is nauseating.
How do you actually, how do you understand visually what's happening?
It'll be a conversation and it will be constant cutting. Obnoxious.
So, but that's the thing is that like but
as far as horror movies go, very few. Mandy's a horror. It's usually like
that's
horror
the thing,
elements.
Is Mandy? I guess
elements.
So, right? Because there are like monsters.
There are monsters in Mandy.
Like it's not like
Wicker Man is definitely a horror film. Knowing has some horror elements, but it's not really a horror film. It doesn't really do it that often.
But that's the thing. Like when he's a superhero, he's the horror adjacent superhero. He loves to bump up against this, and I think what maybe means he doesn't have a lot of straight horror movies in there is because he loves to meld genres.
They would probably accept Vampire's Kiss too. Now I think about it, because there's a vampire in it. That's a comedy.
Yes. So when you meld horror with other genres, more so than in most cases, the essence of what makes a movie horrific is kind of taken from it in favor of making this accessible as a comedy or as an action movie, or as a science fiction. You know, like those elements are often, with the exception of one or two moments, downplayed to service the other genre being blended with horror. Which is why I think that, like, us seeing two definitively horror movies in 1 year from a guy who just frankly has not really dipped his toes in this very much, fully, is really interesting to see from him. Especially considering we touched on this a little bit when we did Bad Lieutenant, and we were talking about Cage in the news and Dream Scenario at the time. When that movie came out, part of his press release said, I'm probably gonna do 3 or 4 more movies, and then I think I'm out. What's so funny is that he said he watched Breaking Bad.
Yeah, he's like,
and was like, guys, I think TV can be good. And he's like 4 golden ages of television behind us now, where he's like, I don't know if you guys have caught this show. It's fucking awesome.
And the first show that he signed up to do, he's gonna be playing Spider-Man.
Yeah, so he was not in the second Spider-Verse movie.
He was not.
He is going to return in the third, which I think will actually make that movie the only third in a series that he's done.
Unless there's a Croods 3.
There is not one yet, to the best of my knowledge, and I hope there's not a Croods. I don't know. Are the Croods okay?
No.
Okay, well.
Second one's better, but they're not good.
Yeah. So he's just like, I totally lost my train of thought there.
He just doesn't do horror very much. It's interesting to see him do such creative takes on some of the horror genres.
Yes.
Maybe, I can't go into. I don't want to spoil a movie that we're not talking about, but Arcadian has a very interesting inspiration that's worth looking into if you're interested in looking up what the inspiration of that movie was. It's absolutely something that horrified me as a kid too. And it's like one of those things. Like, yeah, that's funny to see something that was like just a random scene in a random movie that's just. I'm going to make a horror film out of how this scared me as a kid. So I like that kind of thing.
I think we've done enough prefacing.
Yes.
Right? Do we need to talk about Longlegs in a spoiler-free area?
Let's do that as much as we can.
Okay, let's.
The only thing you really can do talk about is how the marketing is done and how effective the marketing may be, in that they are trying to very much obscure what Nicolas Cage's role is in the film, who his character is, what Longlegs even means.
So,
and I think it's more trying to show off what the type of movie it is, rather than, it's more trying to show and highlight the feel, because you can't show or tell anybody anything about this movie without it being like considered spoilery. I think every single thing that happens in this movie, I don't think I can talk about without like saying that's a spoiler, because like everything feels super important.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're going to lay down a spoiler warning right now.
Yes.
We don't know if that's immediately the thing if we're gonna jump into explicit plot details.
I do very much think that it is actually impossible to talk about the plot, the characters, anything that's not like style or tone. You cannot talk about it without spoilers.
Okay,
it's just I just don't think it's possible.
That's the thing. We're gonna do y'all a favor.
You know who you are.
We're gonna do y'all a favor. Are you calling a specific person out?
Yes.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so we are gonna just do y'all a favor right now. This is a blanket spoiler zone now. If you have not seen Longlegs, for the love of God, please go see it. It's one of the best movies of the year. Do yourself a favor.
I would say it's my favorite movie of 2024.
It's not quite mine, and we can get into.
I'm getting into that right now.
We can get into it.
I'm gonna pull up.
Let's
Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's, because we're laying this out here, and then we'll just bring up the points as we go. Let's do a quick plot rundown. Not a quick plot rundown. Let's hang everything on a plot rundown.
Christ. Okay, so wait, I have to pause for a second, just let you know.
Okay.
Check my letterbox. And I wanted to, boy, when I say it's my favorite movie of 2024,
what's your number 2?
I don't go to the movie theaters that often. I don't see new releases that much. It usually takes me a couple of years to watch a movie. In 2024, it's July, mind you. I've seen 2 films.
2 new films?
2 films released in 2024.
What's the other one?
Arcadian. So I've seen 2 films released in 2024, and Nic Cage is in both of them.
A purist.
Oh, geez. Last year was like that, too.
I have not seen as many as I usually do by this time of the year. I mean, it's worth discussing this year in the grand scheme of things. A lot of things that were going to come out this year were delayed because of the writer strike last year.
Including Longlegs.
Include things that like should have been released maybe last year or earlier this year are kind of just now getting out or are still yet to be released. Things that would have been released this year are still in production. You know, in some like everything is at different stages of having been stopped or delayed.
Yeah.
Which meant going into 2024, a lot of industry analysts were kind of the opinion that 2024 is going to maybe go down in the books as a like bad movie year, you know, collectively. I don't know that is fully the case.
I would put Longlegs as almost top 5 Nic Cage for the films.
This is a really
and he's in a lot of good movies.
Famously. Yeah. He's like, there's a really good argument he's like one of the best movie stars.
Yeah.
Because of just the sheer variety
but
of
there have been good
ways
movies
that he is
this year.
good. Yes.
Yeah.
I think
you've seen more than I have.
I think so. I mean, some of these are technicalities. Vera Drew's The People's Joker, a movie that was basically collectively DMCA'd as wrongfully as copyright infringement because even though it's a parody movie.
Yeah.
And finally got a wide release this past April. One of my favorite movies of the year. Jane Schoenbrun's I Saw the TV Glow is probably my number 1 of the year so far. That was at, I want to say, TIFF last year. And it got its wide release like a month or 2 ago.
Okay.
So like these are things that like theoretically these aren't in the purest definition 2024 movies. In my opinion, when they're available for most people to see them, that's the year that I kind of categorize them in.
Yeah.
Because that's when the most people are going to be talking about them. That's when they're going to have the most effect on, you know, what's going on around. George Miller's Furiosa, I think is kind of already underrated.
Yeah.
You know, it came out and it has the distinct disadvantage of being the follow-up to like one of the greatest films of all time. You know, like but like, and that's the thing is that like when you are a excellent film that is a follow-up to a transcendent, you know, better than being alive sort of movie, it's a hard act to follow.
That might be the only movie that I saw in theaters 3 times and I wanted to see more.
Past guest immortalized on the wall here, Alex Walls, who is famously very persnickety about watching anything at home under any circumstances. I took him to a rep screening at the Roxy Cinema of Mad Max Fury Road a couple weeks ago, and you know he in his very polite professional tone told me that he was like, oh, that really lived up to the hype. That was excellent. Yeah. And I think that honestly, it and Furiosa make each other better. They complement each other really well. Longlegs is right up there for one of the best things I've seen this year.
Incredible.
I really love Longlegs.
So let's get into the thing that this episode is named after.
I know. Yes. Let's 30 minutes in.
Yes.
Let's discuss Longlegs.
Actual spoilers now. Go.
Actual spoilers now, and we'll put probably a little delineation here in the time code for like, if you don't want to hear a bunch of context.
Yes.
This is where we're actually going to discuss it. So Longlegs is the story of rookie FBI agent Lee Harker, who's played by Micah Monroe, who you said is to most people, known from It Follows.
That's where I knew her from.
Yes. Who is investigating a string of murders where whole families are murdered
Hmm.
in
In the same fashion,
in
in the
this
same way,
in the same
on the
fashion, same way,
same
with
time period.
yes,
Yeah.
with zero evidence that anybody else was in the house. Um, and there's no way to really tie one instance to like the previous instance.
Yes.
She is kind of put on a special task force led by Agent Carter. Oh, the agents are Carter and Harker.
Yeah, that's rough.
Okay, that's maybe not the best way to go about doing this. Um, Agent Carter, who's your superior, played wonderfully, but like in a really underrated supporting role here by Blair Underwood.
Blair Underwood is so good at
Blair
this.
Underwood is kind of amazing, and
Yeah.
like it's like I would never go as far as to be like he's better than Micah Monroe or Nicolas Cage.
Well,
But
Micah
he's like-
Monroe is incredible.
Yes, she's really great. He is. I've met him once. I'm actually
yeah?
I am a
Drop.
what is it? I'm trying to remember my credit because it's on an unreleased movie. I was a props PA
Yeah.
for a week on his upcoming film starring him and Sarah Silverman called Viral, that shot in 2021 and is currently listed as TBA release date. So I have no idea when that's coming. He's a wonderful man. I know him best from Medea's Family Reunion was like a DVD mainstay for me when I was a kid. He plays her superior, who he takes his job. It's not that he doesn't take his job seriously.
Yeah.
It's I think
he's in the situation where he doesn't even understand how these things could possibly be connected. You know, the crimes are so similar, kind of idea.
he seems like a guy who's like,
He's the skeptical one.
He's like not even necessarily
Yeah.
skeptic, but he's like, I get things done. I get results. That's kind of his vibe. And Micah Monroe approaches things there's more than one similarity in this movie, I think, to Twin Peaks. But you have a central FBI agent, like special agent character, who approaches things from a more like spiritually methodical point of view. And most of her methodology seems to be a just superhuman level of intuition, which Blair Underwood.
That's where I think we're going to get into. This is a great movie for rewatch.
Yes.
Knowing that we're in spoiler territory, is it intuition or is it a memory?
That's the thing that like I'm saying from this point in the story, it just seems like she has like unreal intuition because she surmises things that you're like, people aren't supposed to do it. Same thing kind of happens with Dale Cooper via dreams in Twin Peaks, where he'll have something come to him and everyone's like, what happened? He's like, I saw a dwarf in my dream. And I know it means that we have to go. It means that we have to go check out this train for murder evidence. Like that is how Cooper operates. And similarly, that's how they follow the leads that Harker gives them.
Yeah.
Underwood, I have to call him on. I cannot say Harker and Carter. I can't do it.
Sure.
I'm gonna call him Underwood. The character's name is Agent Carter. That's my big complaint with this movie is their names are Carter and Harker. I don't like that. So he is a smart, competent enough guy to understand she is giving me clues that are getting results.
Yeah.
So I have to listen. I can't disregard what she's saying.
It avoids the horror trope of I don't believe you.
Yes.
And I'm very glad. I don't need to see another one of those.
It hits that point, but at a point in the story where that frustration and confrontation makes a lot of sense for what the characters have dealt with thus far. Like, I don't see that and get annoyed with it the way that I sometimes will when that sort of thing happens. He is, he's got a little bit of like, there's some implications that he's got a bit of a drinking problem, but not necessarily that he is, well, early on, there's not really any implication that he is abusive as a result of that. He's maybe just a little bit of a irresponsible lush.
Yeah.
And he's got a family who there's a really hilarious scene. So they're
I love that part.
Yeah. So we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but yes. So she starts investigating under Blair Underwood. One night they're working late, and he says, Harker, you gotta fucking chill out. Let's go have a drink. And she basically sits there, watches him get drunk, and it's obvious that he's knowing that she's straight-laced and won't drink. Was like, cool, you can drive me home. I'm not I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
So he takes her home, kind of as her superior, forces her to meet his family
Mhm.
in a really hilarious couple of scenes. They're like, it's up, it's his wife and daughter. His daughter is
Yeah.
up way past her bedtime. And there's this like, Parker is not an unkind person. You can tell she has a little bit of difficult time relating to people.
Mhm.
So as soon as she gets there, the daughter wants to sit and have a conversation with her,
Yeah.
which she, due to like the social niceties, feels like she can't get out of having that conversation.
It's all done in the craziest wide shot.
It's nuts. So she's in her bedroom, sitting on the other side of the bed, their backs to each other.
Yeah.
And she's just asking this child, and I mean this as, most people would mean this as an insult.
Yeah.
I mean this as a compliment. This child talks with dialogue as if she is a character in an M. Night Shyamalan film. She is
Yeah.
brutally direct in the way that really only children can be.
Yeah.
Which, even though Harker is on edge,
One of her questions is something like, "You ever shot a guy?" Something like that.
it's like, if you ever shot a guy, but it's like, it's also just things that sound like, oh, what's your favorite color? The things that kids
that was
might,
one of them.
but that is, that is
was
also
one of
literally,
them.
but like, it's that type of question, but you realize is like very like searching and personal of a thing to ask, where she says, well, did you always want to be a police officer when you were a little girl? And you realize, of course, that would occur to a child's mind, but answering that question is very emotionally involving for the person answering it.
Yeah.
And is complicated to be like, well, not exactly, and maybe that I've sometimes like surmised,
Mhm.
and it's about, like you said, what are we dealing with here? What are we suppressing? And what that we consider an asset is something that we're actually just pulling from the recesses of our mind.
Yeah.
That scene ends with her, and we're gonna put a big pin in this,
Yeah.
saying, will you come to my birthday party?
Mhm.
And in front of his boss's wife, can't turn her down, and says, I'll be there.
Yeah.
And then the movie kind of just delves further into how this investigation is so all-consuming for Harker.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's done in. I mean, she in every single scene. Is it a noir film? Technically, she's
is
the main character
is
I've
that
ever
a
seen.
is that a hallmark of noir?
It's the staple trademark.
Mhm.
Is that your main character will be in every single scene.
Yes.
I think that's the case in this movie. It does seem like a noir thriller, and it has like the lighting elements that you would see in there. I
Mhm.
wouldn't simply call it a noir thriller. It's definitely like a
Is it?
horror thriller.
It reminds me more the way that like a David Fincher crime movie.
Yeah, it's very
kind
David
of,
Fincher.
yeah,
Oh my god, this movie's so much like Seven.
Yes, and
This is just like Seven.
yes,
this
and
movie.
it is yes, it's
You
kind
gotta
of how obsession leads
Oh,
to being consumed by something
Hmm.
to a degree that starts making you wonder, like, what I know technically by solving a murder case I'm
Yeah.
doing good. Was
Even
it
down to,
worth
like-
the personal cost?
Even down to like if I were to like describe the plot of Seven to you, it would sound funny. And if I were to describe the plot of Longlegs, it sounds silly. But it's the tone and the way it's delivered and how serious it's played that makes both of those movies
Mhm.
work so well. That's an interesting comparison.
Well, the difference there is that in Seven, the young recruit is the one who is like, by the book, I'm an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
old-fashioned cops and robbers,
Mhm.
like agent, who there's a really funny scene when he's I think he's trying to read Dante to understand
Yeah,
the references
the
to it.
Deadly Sins, yeah.
He gets like a page into it and gets so frustrated he throws it against the thing. He's like, I don't have patience for this. I need to go shoot
Yeah.
someone. So it's kind of the opposite dynamic, because in that movie Morgan Freeman is, let's calm down
Yeah.
and let's just address things normally. So the investigation is just kind of ongoing, and you see that Harker is kind of having insights into what's happening, the psychology behind this, starting to make links between different murders.
Yes.
And eventually she leads to uh a through a combination of a memory from her mother
Mm-hmm.
and no wait, there's no
Well, we haven't seen that at that
was
point,
there
but yeah.
evidence?
It
How
wasn't
exactly
evidence.
does she get to the guy?
She gets ongoing when she discovers what a potential algorithm when these cases are happening.
Mm-hmm.
She notices a pattern in the dates, and it's always between the little girl's 9th birthday, which always happens on the 14th of the month, and it always happens within 6 days of that. And she notices that there's a pattern that makes a satanic symbol when you arrange it on a
Yes.
calendar. It's so fucking silly, but like,
Yes.
like I say this, it sounds silly. It's so well done that you don't even think about it when you're in the theater.
Yes, I was. It's wonderfully complicated in a way that kind of is like, it does a couple things. One, it shows you that like Harker's perceptiveness, aside from any potentially supernatural abilities, is like actually so impressive because you're like, for you to see the pattern in that is nuts. For you to have the perceptiveness to like to see into that, even if this is something that might be partially a memory for you.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you more faith in your protagonist and in the competence that she's approaching the problem with. It is so complicated and brushes over some of the finer details of what's going on that you as an audience member are kind of given license to not take this too seriously, to not like get bogged down in the details of like, wait, I also have to get out the string and the pins and make sense of every single little thing that's happening here.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's great. It's the best type of serial killer bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of part of it's involving us in the way that a true crime story does, which is like helping us get bogged down in clues that are frankly none of our fucking business.
Well, I think that's what I want to talk about is I think when you have a crime thriller, you have to have a lot of red herrings. And just because of how strange, complicated, and just unexplainable some of the things are in this movie, I don't know if anything in this is a red herring. I think everything in this allows for it to be a vague representation of what is the audience taking away from this. Because leaving that, I don't know, maybe you and I have a different interpretation of what any of that actually even means. Because like, it could be supernatural things in there. It could be psychological. It could be hypnosis. It could be like, I don't know, something in chemicals. I don't know. There's like all sorts of things in there.
My take on these sorts of things, I know some people get frustrated by this and some people are dismissive and call this lazy writing. This is why I like ambiguity in my work. I think that the answer to that question is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the solution.
But my point is, I don't think there's a single element that is out of place.
No. That's the thing is, it's all of a piece thematically and aesthetically. So to me, at the end of this movie, when I am not given a concrete answer as to whether the events of it were supernatural, whether the events that were the result of hypnosis, who had agency in different moments, none of that stuff needs a concrete answer, because the goal of the movie is not to give me a conclusive answer to that. It's to get me thinking about it, to develop my own opinion about it.
Yeah.
And that is ultimately what will help me take away the most from the experience of watching the movie, is being given all these things and being allowed to draw my own conclusion, which again, I think makes this movie about true crime, right?
Yeah.
True crime is all about kind of drawing your own conclusions. Yes, based off as much logic and facts as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's allowing you to just figure this shit out on your own. And then it gets out so fast that you're not even really given any space in which for the movie to explicitly tell you, like the ending of Inception, where you see the top, spoilers for Inception, I guess. You see the top spinning and it cuts out last minute. That movie is inviting you to take a moment and say, is it a dream? Is it not a dream? I don't know. And that movie is also intentionally ambiguous, but it's putting a finer point on asking you to consider the ambiguity of it. Longlegs has a really, I know we're in spoiler territory, but I won't give away just this second. has a as a big shocker, cuts to a repetition of a pretty iconic line from earlier in the movie
hmm
and says, "Fuck you, we're out." And the movie's over. It's
Yeah.
not giving you any time to sit there and think about, oh wow. It is asking you to leave the theater, shuffle out in a little bit of shell shock.
Yeah.
And then once you're back out on the street walking onto the subway platform, you're like, oh, okay, wait, I can start piecing together what I think I'm supposed to be asked to think,
Mhm.
what I'm bringing to it, like what are my baggage. Um, we haven't actually talked about Nicolas Cage's character yet.
Because the marketing definitely didn't.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the poster. The poster has a kind of like sketchy Ralph Bakshi-esque
Ralph Bakshi, of course.
depiction of like an outline of his face. It looks
Well,
like
one of the posters. The one I see most often is the one of Micah Monroe, like in
covered,
complete shock.
which is, by the way,
We-
a horrible.
let's
That
get
doesn't.
to the
That's
poster,
not.
and
illustrative at all of what's happening in this movie.
Let's get to that. And
There's
then I want
there's-
to talk about Micah Monroe for sure.
There's two main posters. We'll talk about performances specifically.
Yeah.
But so we've gotten to the point where the plot, describing the plot, is now just like they go to a thing, they investigate, they get an argument, they go to a thing, they invest. That's what happens to the middle section of the movie. Yes, the advertising. There are two posters. There's one of Micah Monroe in a struggle with an unseen figure's arm wrapped around her in kind of a torturous, scary way.
Yeah.
I personally, it doesn't feel like a. I don't.
That's not
There's
even
no
something that happens in the movie, right?
That's not referring to a specific thing. I don't. It doesn't make sense for the movie that we're seeing.
It's not the movie.
The other one is a kind of serial killer. What do you call it? Sketch.
Yeah.
Of parts of Nicolas Cage's character's face that is made as abstract as possible, so that you don't actually get the details of it.
Yeah.
Now I want to backtrack a little bit to the marketing here and talk about how the marketing changed after the movie came out.
Okay.
So there's two big things I've seen. One, this movie is done quite successfully for itself.
Mm-hmm.
There is a really hilarious marketing image that the official accounts are using. I thought this was a meme at first.
Yeah. This is great.
They put on the poster the image of Nicolas Cage's head, like in the kind of dot matrix, whatever.
Yeah, it's just film grain.
Which said Longlegs, #1 movie in America, with a little tiny asterisk, and that asterisk points some text right below it that says, "Except for Despicable Me 4."
Yeah,
which is so funny to see on the Longlegs poster
on a horror film.
Yes,
that's just a movie about dread.
Yes, it's so funny.
Yeah.
So one, the marketing department is having a lot of fun with this sort of thing, and then two, there is a viral. I've been seeing it on like Instagram a lot, where you'll see Nicolas Cage's character shrouded. There's an interrogation scene that we'll get to shortly.
Yeah.
It's like, and then it shows you below. Here's the heart rate monitor we had on Micah Monroe when she saw Nicolas Cage in makeup for this character for the first time, and it never dropped below 170 beats per minute.
Yeah.
And it's part of the whole, this movie will make you fucking lose your mind, man. You're not going to, it's some sort of Lovecraftian horror that will make you go insane the second you see it, which, like I said, I think this is a wonderful execution of constantly ratcheting dread. I would not describe the movie as like, it's like you said, they're marketing it the same way that like Paranormal Activity is marketed.
Yeah.
It's not that. And there aren't like really jump scares in this movie, or even really a lot of threats of jump scares. It's not that type of movie.
I think there's a constant threat of jump scares, but it's just like that doesn't really happen.
I guess the tension that's building,
just the tension feels
the tension that's building is constant.
Yeah.
It never feels like it's building up to a specific in the moment. It just, the tension you feel is not of a moment. The tension you feel is of the investigation going on and on and on until you feel like you're going to go insane.
Yeah.
That's the way that this movie kind of affects you. Let's talk about the way that the Nicolas Cage character is introduced into the narrative of the film.
Yes.
And the way that this is quite a unique portrayal, and it's an excellent performance, I think, but he's not in very much of the movie at all.
No.
So in the course, help me out with some of the details here, because I'm struggling to remember it. In the course of the investigation, Micah Monroe receives a letter that she uses to decode the kind of Zodiac killer.
Have you ever tried solving a cipher before? It's way harder than that. usually. But like if it's like, it was presented as a cipher that people weren't
Mhm.
figuring out, like he was writing letters in this and no one had figured it out, very unlikely that you're able to solve that overnight. Like there are
Well,
some ciphers out there that have taken decades for people to even like get parts of them
yeah.
figured out.
Um,
It's
well,
way harder
I
than you
took
think
it
it
as
is.
he was giving her.
He
He
might
was.
have he wants her to know because of things we'll discuss
Yes,
later.
yeah. I think he is. He's not giving her the solution. He's certainly nudging her in the right direction.
Yeah.
Longlegs, the killer.
Uh-huh.
So she figures out the cipher, and in investigating another murder, because that's the other thing too, is these murders are ongoing. This
Yes.
isn't like, oh, this happened, and there's the constant threat of them happening, including an allusion to one in the letter.
Yeah.
Um, she realizes through kind of bringing up the memories of this a a memory she has from her own childhood.
Mhm.
And it's the vaguest thing. She realizes she has to go talk to her mother, with whom she doesn't have a very close relationship,
Yeah.
for specifics on how to solve this. Says, "Do you have a picture of this specific man I think that we encountered when I was a young girl?"
Yeah.
And her mother doesn't want to talk about it. It says, "You're crazy. I don't know what you're referring to."
Mhm.
And in digging through her mother's things, finds a picture that matches the profile of a guy who lives not far from where one of the most recent murders happened,
Uh-huh.
basically. Um, and that is Nicolas Cage's character. I was
Yes.
trying to find
The name of
the
the
name of
character?
the character, because
Just long legs.
it is Longlegs.
I don't
Uh
think it matters what the name of the
he
character
does
is.
like
I know he has a name, it
I guess
doesn't
what I'm saying
matter.
is, like, yes, the character has um uh let me see here.
I'm gonna talk about
You talk about this and I'll find this real
I
quick.
wanna talk a little bit about because while you're looking for that,
Yes.
just I wanna go into performances, especially, and, I really have to shout out Micah Monroe's performance in this
Yes.
because, like, out of everybody in this film, she's the one who gives, I think, the best performance out of everybody in here because she has a constant, like, you feel like, when you see an actor who has both an inside and outside performance, she
Yes.
has an outside composure, but an inside shaking the entire movie. And I love
She's
it. She
sim-
does it so well where she just feels on the very edge the entire film. And it just feels like the most realistic, I cannot keep my shit together, but I have to kind of feeling of the
it's
entire time she's on screen. And I'm like, so, like, she fucking nailed it.
yes. The way the stakes of any given situation for her always feel very severe
Yes.
is I think kind of key to the performance. It's like you said, she's simmering
Yeah.
just below the surface. The
Mhm.
pot is kind of like wiggling on the top. The lid is
Yeah.
wiggling on the top of the pot a little bit here. And because, as we talked about, the scene with Carter's daughter,
Mhm.
and a scene where she's interrogating a murderer,
Yeah.
both of those are kind of equally nerve-wracking for her.
But these are scenes where, like, because of her position and because of her character and because of what she's doing, she has to keep a straight face the entire time. You see the straight face, but as the audience, you don't feel that it's real.
Mhm.
And I don't even know I don't know how to do that as an actor. That seems like really difficult to keep a straight face, but like still convey the emotion, what I'm actually.
Yeah. She Yes, I think that she's portraying a character who is trying poorly to
Mhm.
hide the way she feels in any given situation.
Yeah.
She's not really concealing her feelings,
Yeah.
but she is acting against her instincts because she knows, I have to do this in this social situation, or I have to do this for the good of the overall
Yeah.
investigation, basically. Micah Monroe is, like, wonderful. The movie just simply doesn't work without her. You
Oh
know.
yeah, no, not at all.
No. It's But to go back to Longlegs, who I can't. The character is given a name, and it's like a long,
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
It ultimately doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Um. So she they capture him. He goes in willingly.
Hmm.
Um. And there is this, I think, that's kind of become the focus of the marketing now. This interrogation scene between the two of them,
Yeah.
in which he asks her. She's developed this theory that he has an accomplice,
Hmm.
that he's actually not going into the houses and murdering, and that's why they can't prove that there's any like breaking and entering. Nobody's actually entering the houses.
Yeah.
She is trying to extract that from him. And he mostly talks in kind of like sing-songy biblical verse.
Mhm.
And
It's
is
a very
taunting.
religious movie.
Yes, is
Yeah.
like taunting. That's another theme of movies that you
Yeah.
cover on this show. Is kind of taunting her, going back and forth. And he doesn't really give her any information. He alludes to some familiarity to her,
Mhm.
which is basically confirming that this is a guy I had an interaction with. I didn't find a picture of him in my house by coincidence.
Yeah.
So all he's done is said, your mother is connective tissue to what's going on here. And she thinks her mother knows who the accomplice might be or may know and have suppressed it.
Do you feel that the lack of red herrings thing and everything being important kind of gave that away a little too easily? Because like there are like 5 characters with names in this movie.
I'll tell you this. I routinely,
Yeah.
and I'm honestly glad to be this way.
Mhm.
When there is a quote unquote twist or reveal,
Yeah.
I'm often very bad at seeing those.
Okay.
I never ever see that stuff coming.
Oh, okay.
And after the fact, I'll be like, when people are like, "Oh, it was obvious to me," I'll be like, "Yeah, yes, you're right. I was being dumb. I was kind of lost in the movie."
Okay, yeah, that's totally acceptable.
It usually means that I usually have a pretty good time with it. Like
Yeah.
it'll happen, and I'll legitimately be like, "Shit." Okay, and it means that like I'm kind of glad to be that kind of dummy. It means
it's still a good reveal, but it's like, what's more satisfying, it being one of the like the accomplice being an important character, or the accomplice being another guy we haven't seen yet.
Yes.
How many times are you going to see that?
No, I mean, this is the type of movie, the way it's
Yeah.
structured, and the way it introduces the few characters of importance.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be totally like unprecedented at this point in the movie for them to introduce a new accomplice character.
Oh yeah, no. So like that was also like I totally saw that possibility too.
Yeah.
Like, totally could have been just some person we never saw yet.
But it should be said, at the end of the interrogation scene,
Yes.
This is, I think, where like the movie like really shocked me with its like brutality.
Yeah.
Longlegs says "Hail Satan,"
Hail
and
Satan.
slams his head repeatedly into the table, and kills himself by like essentially caving his own face in.
Yeah, and it's pretty grotesque. Yeah.
It is this movie's really good at showing you just enough gore that you can kind of infer the
There's
really
not a lot
nasty.
of gore in this. I was expecting it to be a bloodbath.
But there are a couple of very explicit but very quick shots.
It's very realistic.
Yes, and you get a couple shots of like Cage's like smashed in face.
Yeah.
And it's gnarly. It's a pretty
rough,
brutal death.
Yeah.
And the thing that really gets me in that scene, after he's smashed his head against the table probably 3 or 4 times, you can see this is the one little bit of humanity you see in the character at all.
Yeah.
You can see him clearly in tremendous pain hesitate to go down for like his 5th or 6th hit or whatever, where he's like, "Oh God, okay, I'm gonna do it." And it's a little bit of I'm trying to think of like another moment in Cage's filmography that's like made me think this maybe honestly.
Yeah.
I know it's like tacky to keep bringing this movie up, but like Ghost Rider, because when he transforms, he pretends like it's some combination of it hurts, but he wants it to happen so bad, but he's a little afraid of what's going to happen when he does it.
Yeah.
And in that moment where you see him like kind of take the, it's like a little bit of him gritting his teeth before he's going to smash his head. It's the biggest, like, people talk about, they often minimize him to like how gonzo his performances can be.
Yeah.
This is, I think, the moment in the performance that many people are expecting every time they go in and see a Nicolas Cage.
Well, there's
one. Right?
There's more than one scene in this movie where he's screaming.
Yes, there's do you want to talk about the other one? Yeah,
we can talk about the other one. But while we're on the scene I want to talk about like if I'm sure it's intentional symbolism, because like I didn't pick up on this until like thinking about it afterwards. But there's definitely a lot of interesting symbolism, and we haven't talked about his appearance. What he looks like, and he is completely pale, and every time we see him he's wearing all white. He's got long white hair, and his face is like completely white too, but completely deformed. And the way it's deformed, I think, is important to the plot.
Okay.
Not important to the plot, but important to the symbolism of the movie. And I don't know if it's like character thing or if it's just like a, we got to make the villain ugly kind of thing. But he looks like the monster from Terror at 40,000 Feet.
Oh God,
You know what I'm talking about?
So that's not where my mind went.
That's where I was
This
thinking.
feels like there were two immediate.
That's
points,
not the symbolism, but
there were two immediate points of visual comparison. One of which is intentional, and one of which I think honestly they probably would have known, tried to distance from this, and in my opinion, kind of failed to distance from this. So there's the one that I think that is very intentional because of like this is a movie about an intuition-led FBI special agent. I think there's a very intentional visual homage to Killer Bob from Twin Peaks.
Okay.
Who is played by Frank Silva with long, kind of dirty gray hair.
Yeah.
Dressed very blue collar, the way that Longlegs kind of is.
Yeah.
And two, it is impossible not to see a little bit of Heath Ledger's Joker in this. In this vision. And the thing is, I think
that seems very unintentional.
I think that's the thing is.
I'll give you my theory, and maybe like I think it's unavoidable with that one.
Here's what I would say. I think they know that they're veering up very close to visually how that looks because they have the white makeup.
Yeah.
And I think they want to achieve some of the effectiveness of that makeup job without having you sit there thinking, oh, they're doing the Joker, right? Because he's actually not very like the Joker at all. I didn't even
think of that, yeah.
This is something that dawned on me afterward.
Yeah.
So I think that they are probably the reason why there's so much prosthetics and why there's all these like deformities is because they're actually trying to they're trying to give themselves an extra element that distances them from the Joker visually.
Well, the deformities they read into my analysis.
Yes, so. Yeah. What do you think of the deformities?
In character, I think they're intentional and they're self-inflicted. And the reason why I say that is because I think his appearance is supposed to be reminiscent of a porcelain doll. And in the context of the film, porcelain dolls are how the curse or the demon or the hypnosis or whatever it is spread from person to person. So him looking like a porcelain doll and smashing his face like a porcelain doll we would have dropped, I think that's the intentional symbolism there.
I think you're kind of dead on.
5 stars.
That's no. I hadn't, because obviously he is, as they discover when they bring him in, he is a toy maker by trade.
He's a toy maker. That's the other thing too, and he looks like he's like a fucked up Geppetto. Yeah.
Yes, he looks like a guy who spends all his time focusing on the fine features of children in a basement. That's what he looks like. Yes.
Yeah.
But the porcelain doll thing is absolutely because he like a toy maker, especially like an old fashioned one like this. And I also want to sidebar within this sidebar.
Yeah, I know.
I think we're actually like 4 sidebars deep now. This movie has an interesting relationship to time. When do you think this movie happens? Like, when do you think it takes place?
When do I think this takes place?
Yeah.
Well, they make it kind of explicit that it takes place somewhere in the middle. Right?
Do they?
Yeah, because they have portraits of Bill Clinton on the wall in the
You're right. But I think that
her birthday. Oh yeah, it's 19.
Her birthday's in the 70s. Yeah, she's in her like mid 20s.
She's supposed to be about like mid to late 20s, so it's early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that it's trying to evoke a kind of like 60s or 70s style of like office and portrayal of the FBI. And I think that like, while you're right then, so the movie does make explicit exactly when it's happening.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of trying to make everything look anachronistic in both directions. Where it's like you've got this like guy who's still, he's a little like Longlegs himself is a little out of time.
Yeah.
Because in the mid 90s, the way toy sales were commercialized at that point means that like people weren't buying people weren't buying 4-foot sized like China dolls anymore. That's not what kids wanted to play with.
The cursed American Girl dolls that he makes.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing is that he makes them.
It's also a cursed doll movie. It's like everything. Wow.
Yes.
There's so much in this movie. There's just so much, but it all makes sense. And it's all cohesive somehow.
Yes, and so Let's get out of this little Russian nesting doll discussion wise. You're right. That's another type of doll. Inescapable.
Yeah.
So Longlegs kills himself. He was the only concrete evidence they had.
Yes.
At which point this
And
causes
it wasn't even concrete.
that
That's
this
crazy.
they were just the closest. He was a person of interest, which
Yeah.
they had not had up until this point. This causes an irreparable rift between Blair Underwood and Agent Harker.
Yes.
At this point, he says, "Enough of your bullshit. I have humored you too long to the case's detriment because now we don't have anything concrete. All we know is that there is an accomplice out there and we have nothing on them." And she says, "You need to trust my methods. I need to keep being given the wide berth to do things the way I want to." And they basically they disagree. Like it's like she's taken off the case, I think, is what happened. So she, in an independent fashion, tries to find a connection between her mother and the potential accomplice.
That's right.
Very quickly, we realize, as most people have figured out by now, except for me, that her mother is the accomplice.
Yeah. The only other character with a name in the movie.
Yes, and through flashbacks,
yeah,
it's made explicit to us that Longlegs came to Agent Harker when she was a little girl,
which is the very first scene of the movie.
Yes, it's the very first scene of the movie. But you don't know that the little girl you see in that. Yeah, the Polaroid taken of Longlegs is one she takes at the beginning of the movie, so that's why it's a bit of a repressed memory.
Yep.
And Longlegs does through using the same methodology as the families that are part of the investigation.
Yeah.
Like binds them in the house and tells Harker's mother, "I'm going to kill your daughter.
Yeah.
Unless you help me commit murders."
Yeah.
All over. And so what she serves as is she poses as this is like the most bizarre thing in the movie, I think.
Yeah.
She poses as a nun donating toys from a local like charity to children.
Who's going to suspect the nun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is invited into the home, and inside the doll,
it's a scary nun movie too.
That's the thing. This movie has a lot of connections to the Conjuring universe, apparently. Yeah. Once inside the house, inside the doll is a metal ball that contains. Now here's where
this is where it could be.
This is where the movie.
Yep.
So this is one possible interpretation. This may not be even what the movie is trying to state, but this is one explanation. Inside the head of the doll is what a medical examiner who, looking at this earlier, is incredibly satisfied with himself. He's like, "I found it in the head, so I've been calling it the brain." He's very happy. He's very happy with himself for coming up with that. There's a metal ball which may or may not contain the essence of Longlegs, in which he possesses the father of the family to murder all of his family and then kill himself.
Yeah, or it's just satanic, or it's just the devil, or it's just hypnosis, or it's just some kind of sound frequency, some scientific explanation could
or
come
Harker's
out of it.
mother is doing this. Like that's the thing, is that like all of these.
Well, that explains no breaking and entering. Is of course you have the nun that you're letting in. Of course she could be the one doing it. We don't know for sure, but there are a lot of different ways you could be explaining what's going on, which is why I think it works, and it's a movie that is gonna like stick around in the zeitgeist for a while. It's a movie you can just keep talking about because there are so many ways to interpret it.
That's the thing, is that you and I can have a fun time, and I feel like we had conversation coming out and we've been talking about it a little bit. We didn't want to like totally, blow the conversation before we sat down to record it. But I love that about movies like this, where there are like 6 like hinted at valid explanations, not to consider all the ones that will just that a filmmaker could never predict, that will just kind of come out of nowhere when enough people have seen a thing and rewatched it and brought their own unique experience to watching it. And you can like have all these, and you can have good solid arguments for why you think like you've made the case for why this is what the movie is saying, or what this is what the movie is about.
And I feel like Oz Perkins goes into it with he knows in his head like what the answer is, but he'll never tell you what he thinks.
No. It's a very
it's masterfully done.
it's a very David Lynch thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like what is it? I think that he's being interviewed about Eraserhead specifically, and someone says he says to the interviewer, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film. And the interviewer says, would you explain that? He just says no. It's it's in my opinion the quintessential Lynch quote where he's like, I will of course through my work point you in the direction of what I'm trying to say. But if I plant an explicit idea in your head and I tell you concretely, this is what I mean by this is the statement I'm making with this movie, it loses its power to be caught in your brain like a splinter.
Yeah.
And just wedge itself in there, and you fixate on it, and you start to create worlds within the story by wondering, what could this possibly mean? What could this possibly be about?
Longlegs stuck with me for sure.
Yes,
and I probably will continue to do so.
I am like kind of already. I would like to go back and watch it.
You need to see this movie many times.
Yes. And so I'm sorry to go back to go back to like, we'll finish the plot rundown because we're actually very close to the end.
Yes.
And then we can like fully talk about implications of the end.
Not personal a lot of plot. It's just a lot of investigation.
Yeah. But a lot of the plot happens right here at the end.
Yeah.
So she finds out she has this personal connection to Longlegs. Her life was apparently bought through the suffering and murder of all these families, unbeknownst to her. She's not, by the way, a willing collaborator in this.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother is I mean, like, you could say she was put in this difficult situation by Longlegs, but her mother's still like is accomplice to like dozens and dozens of murders. It's not like she like she actively participated in them. And she gets I think it's a note from Longlegs as she's finding all this stuff out by looking through her mom's house. And the note says, you're late for the birthday party.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So forgetting that Carter's daughter invited her to the birthday party early in the movie. The Harker's mother has already gone over there and brought the doll. Carter's daughter is clinging to the doll. Is lovingly embracing it.
Yeah.
And Blair Underwood I agree with you, by the way. Micah Monroe is, on the whole, the most essential performance to the whole movie working. I can't think of another actor that you could frame this movie around.
Yeah.
Blair Underwood in this scene might be the single best bit of acting in the movie.
It's so scary. That is the scariest.
But simultaneously,
Nic Cage's performance is really scary.
It's simultaneously hilarious.
Yeah.
So she gets there, and then whatever, like you said, hypnosis, whatever influence, satanic,
whatever
possession, whatever it is, has taken hold of Carter and his family. And this manifests as the daughter being totally smitten with this doll, the mother being a kind of hysterical, chipper, like, oh, of course, everything will always work out for the best.
Yeah.
And the father just set on edge, on just like the tippy toe edge, like of insanity. And she gets in there and says, you're late for the birthday party, come in here and sit down. I'm gonna go it's in, like, he's wording things in like he's just like saying, he's like, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go in the other room and murder my wife.
Yeah, he starts it off as like, I need to cut the cake, but I need a big knife or something.
Honey, will you
cut
like that? He says, honey,
help me cut the cake with
honey, will
knife?
you find me a big knife to cut the cake with? And they say, and as they're getting up, funniest fucking line in the movie, they're getting up, the wife says, we'll be right back, and he says, I'll be right back. You'll still be in the kitchen. He's
so scary though. I hate it.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. And it's like, it is simultaneously this just dry gallows humor.
Yeah.
With also this just underlying threat of domestic violence.
Yeah.
That is like, Carter's character is not, like, Underwood's character is not like, you don't get the hint that he's like abusive outwardly, But when he comes home drunk earlier,
Yeah.
he's kind of like staggering as he goes to hug their daughter, and you can see the mother is made a little uncomfortable by like her daughter having to see her father, like not necessarily that
Yeah.
she's like he's gonna hit her, but just like you're exposing my daughter to these things,
Hmm.
and that in itself is abusive. And it's the mother's like tight-lipped like kind of abeyance of what's happening
Yeah.
is mirrored in her put on a happy face at the party, and his disregard for how she would like her family to function internally is manifested in him just becoming outwardly threatening and abusive.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, it's hilarious. It is it's like frankly I'm like Underwood is kind of on my supporting actor list
Yeah.
just for he's really good in the
He's
rest of
so
the movie,
good.
to be clear.
Mhm.
This scene is bravura shit. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Um
Well, that was a scene where like I'm like even in shock, like again, because like I
like
forgot
just
that this was
reviewing it, yeah.
no, in the context of being in the theater and listening to the reactions around me and hearing your reaction again is reminding me that yeah, people laughed during that scene, and I was fucking upset. I hated it.
Well,
That was like so incredibly upsetting. I couldn't think of laughing. It
when
was
when
so
he said
horrible.
when he says I'll
Yeah.
be right back, you'll still be in the kitchen.
Yeah.
The laughter that like kind of waves over the audience
Yeah.
is a combination of uncomfortableness because
Yeah.
we all know he's not being
Yeah.
transparent. She's
Oh,
being
no.
incredibly transparent. We all know exactly what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And two, that like it is legitimately it's a funny like
Yeah.
gallows humor joke. Like it's funny
Mhm.
in a couple different ways. So they go in the other room and
Mhm.
you loudly hear her just being murdered. Like again in a like
It's another thing where it's
in
not
a
a very gory movie,
in
but
a
they don't show that. They don't show it. Yeah.
tragicomic
Yeah.
mode. And Harker gets in an argument with her mother in the living room
Mhm.
where basically even though Longlegs is dead, the mother says we have to appease him, we have to carry out these plans.
Yeah.
Otherwise you'll die. And she's been kind of having these dizzy spells throughout. Like there's almost some implication that like there is a real concrete way in which Micah Monroe's character will like have like a brain hemorrhage and die immediately like
Yeah.
if this ritual does not continue.
Yeah.
That like this is not just a deal that's being made to protect
That's
her.
the thing
that,
I want
like,
to catch on a rewatch is like
this is
when
like a
those
curse.
line up. Yeah.
Yes.
What the timing
Like,
is between
oh,
that
yeah,
and the
like-
next victims being found.
Yeah, like if that's happening
Because there's a
because
set of victims they don't find for like a month. So it's like I wonder if that
Yeah.
timing lines up. It probably does.
yeah, no, those are the fun details to
Yeah.
be like, oh wow, it really does follow its own internal like rules very well.
I'm sure it does.
So Alicia Witt and Micah Monroe kind of get in this argument about Micah Monroe's argument is you cannot kill this kid. You can't
Yeah.
like do that. And she says this has to happen. I think well, we can like talk about what this like actually means and what it's meant to symbolize, but she's like, you don't I think almost more out of I've done this so long. This is almost what I've dedicated my life to.
Yeah.
Doing this is almost more important to me than keeping you safe.
Mhm.
That's like the really scary thing I think you find
Oh,
in
yeah,
Alicia
yeah.
Witt's character. Eventually she realized like it's the sunk cost fallacy, right? Of like, I've been doing
Mhm.
this so long that it feels wrong to stop doing this at a certain point. And she has totally forgotten that doing this was a form of protecting her daughter
Yeah.
because now she's threatening her daughter
Yeah.
to continue doing it. Underwood comes back in the room, covered in his wife's blood, carrying an axe, attacks them. Micah Monroe shoots Underwood
Yeah.
and her mother
Yeah.
to protect the child, who, by the way, is
Just
under
hugging
some
the
sort of
doll
spell.
the whole time. Yeah.
Like literally, she pulls her away from the doll to like keep her close to protect her from the daughter from the father who's
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
back with the axe. And like when she has to let go of her for a second to like deal with Underwood and then the mom,
Yeah.
she like goes back to like hug the doll. She does not care about the fact she just watched her father be murdered. She does
Yeah.
not care about the fact that she just heard her mother being murdered in the other room. She does not care about the fact that she saw another woman murder another woman with a bullet through the head.
Mhm.
And then like this is like we're like there's 10 seconds left in the
This-
movie
yeah,
at this
yeah.
point. she picks up the girl. Micah Monroe has not collapsed yet, so she's going to have a dizzy spell and
Yeah.
die or whatever. Then we're not
We
going to
don't
know
see
if that
it.
explicitly
Yeah.
happened. She grabs the girl who kind of passively follows her.
Mhm.
They leave the house. It smash cuts right back to a repetition of Nic Cage saying, "Hail Satan," and then the movie's over. Fuck you, go home.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like that's where the movie leaves off.
Yeah.
It does not give you any time to think about what happened on screen.
Yeah. And this doesn't explain anything, and that's what's great.
No.
It doesn't explain anything.
You are just left with your own thoughts and conclusions.
Yeah.
Just like first of all, like it's not only just like,
Yeah.
the kind of gross true crime obsession that has become so commonplace in media now. People who like talk about they talk about like people's grisly ruined lives.
Yeah.
The way they talk about Harry Potter fandom. It's like really like it's a very kind of gross sub industry within pop culture.
Yeah, we're gonna make the movie about filicide that's not fun.
Yes. And I think it's definitely critical of that tendency in people. But yeah, I don't know. Like this movie, like even literally like describing the way it ends, I'm left a little. I've lost my point of like my points that I was gonna make because I'm like, oh yeah, it's so jarring.
It's so
the way
horrendous,
that it just walks away from it.
This movie's disgusting and it's amazing.
Yes, I think this thing is amazing. I think Cage's performance is amazing.
His performance is incredible. We barely even talked about it, but he's also barely in the film.
He's barely in the movie. Let's now that we've done it.
Yeah.
Now that we've run through the movie.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Cage and like his performance in this thing specifically.
Sure.
He's in this really bizarre, very intentional face makeup.
Yes.
That I agree with you now that you said that like is very illuminating.
Because like especially when you see him as a younger man, it's like he looks like he was burned, like almost like a like a chemical burn, like he's trying to smooth his skin.
Yes.
Right? Like a dog.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, in that way, the severity of the angle of his face actually
and I don't know.
I don't
know if it's supposed to be like powder makeup on him or if it's supposed to be just I don't ever go out in the sun. Like I don't know if that's what it is either.
My take on it is similar to how you like he may be mutilating himself.
Yeah.
I think he
may be
altering I think he's altering the color of his skin.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so funny actually. I hate to keep bringing it back to this. Because of the severity of the angles in his face.
Yeah.
It does bring to mind the Nicholson Joker as well. I think like no, truly like just like the really human faces just aren't shaped like he looked like he had like a botched plastic surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the performance a little bit because this is a hard thing it's hard to nail down like what exactly he's doing.
Yeah.
He's playing what he's doing is within the wheelhouse of Hannibal Lecter, crazy serial killer who's been brought in and is speaking to you cryptically, in Bible verses.
Yeah, he's more of a Manson character. I mean, actually, I think they directly compare him to Manson in the movie.
Yeah.
He's more of a Manson character than the Buffalo Bill character.
Yes. So, and this is certainly a heightened performance.
Yes.
This is not at all like
Longlegs starring Nicolas Cage has a heightened performance.
Yes,
for sure.
No. But that's what I mean is like he's not playing a guy who is he's not meant to like represent a guy who could like even pass in.
No, he's a cartoon character, but a scary one. Yeah.
Because there actually is a scene where he just like goes to a hardware store to make a purchase.
Yeah.
And you find out through the context, he can't even have a normal interaction with like a person sitting at a register.
Yeah.
And you find out that he's just comes in and bothers this poor girl at the register all the time to the point that she's actually just kind of bored by it.
Yeah.
Like he's just so routinely annoying. That's the thing is he can't. I think that's saying a couple things. One, how dumb law enforcement can often be because they will let a guy who is that obviously unstable just go unremarked upon for as long as he's been operating on his own.
Well, they got nothing to put him on. It is a true crime movie, and if you've ever read or watched any true crime, you can report someone for being weird. You could report somebody for having a body in their backyard. The police aren't going to do anything about it.
No, exactly. Yeah. He is kind of given to flights of fancy in the way that a Cage character can often be.
Yeah.
He is doing the trademark Nicolas Cage like howling and outbursts and the
There's a
big
scene where he's
dramatic.
just driving and he's like singing along to the song and screaming, and it's incredible.
Yes.
It's actually mirrored later when Micah Monroe is driving the same car.
Yes.
Which I think is another, like, they're connected.
Hers is more of just kind of a primal. It's not.
She's like hunched over, like intense, but like you see, she's making the same. She's in the same pose that he was when he was screaming.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's. I think it's kind of a movie about. Here's my like big take on Longlegs, the character.
Yeah.
Like symbolically.
Okay.
Rather. He is the kind of looming threat that a father figure has in your life.
Yes.
That he's just like, even if your father is not abusive to you, there is something kind of inherently terrifying about men.
Yeah.
You know, and your father is this big guy that like you just have to really hope your dad is a good guy.
Yeah.
Because if he's not a good guy, it will destroy your early life and kind of your ability to ever build an effective one for yourself.
Yeah.
So
you're hitting on something that I really
yes.
do need to talk about, especially before we hit the end of this. I know we're go on as long as we need to, but I think you have the same interpretation of this as I do.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think this movie's about.
Yeah.
And something I didn't figure out immediately, and wasn't until thinking about it later, I figured out why it's called Longlegs.
Oh, just Daddy Longlegs?
Daddy Longlegs.
I don't necessarily.
I think that's why it is. It is about fathers.
I don't think it's
all the murders are done by fathers, right? All the murders are done by fathers, and the only one where that always happens, always done by the fathers, and the only time where there's not a father around is Lee Harker's family. Mm-hmm. There's no we don't see a father. I don't know if there's a father.
Let me ask you this: are you directly implying that Longlegs is Harker's father?
I'm not directly implying. That
okay, that's what I thought. That's where I thought
that's why he would have done the murder himself. Is because there was no father.
He is in a like really perverted way the closest thing Harker has to a father figure.
Not so much that, it's just more so like that's why he's in that position in that one. Is because like
he has a trademark of a lot of bad fathers, which is that he's absent.
Yeah.
He's absent in her day-to-day life, but still holds great influence over how it is played out.
Yeah.
Through his kind of his distant manipulation of other people.
But yeah, it's a bad dad's movie.
Yeah, I think like that's my like ultimate take on it.
Okay, cool.
Is that it is a movie about the just inherent threat that even, I mean, this is honest. This is like a true and sad fact. Even if you have a good father in your life, there is that 0.5% threat in the back of your head that he's bigger than me and he could do damage to me and everybody else in my family and everybody I love. And the kind of just inherent scariness of the fact that our society is built around putting our trust and our safety in the hands of these like kind of scary monsters. And I think that this is really interesting coming from a filmmaker whose father played one of the most iconic scary monsters in film history.
Yeah, so his father was Anthony Perkins,
who played Norman Bates.
Very famously played Norman Bates in, what is it, 4 Psycho films?
Four Psycho films. The third one he directed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, so like, you want to talk about like Oz Perkins and family. It is kind of important. It is kind of unfortunate, but it is really important to shaping of his characters that his dad was one of the greatest horror villains of all time, and his mom was in one of the planes that struck the World Trade Center.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah, so
I did not know that.
Both of his parents very much influenced,
like notorious.
Yeah.
I was reading an interview with him, where he talked about how he views contemporary horror films, and in a way where he like. It's like one of those ones where I'm like, I know he doesn't think he is maliciously throwing shade. Yeah. That being said, if I'm the person these things are being said about, it's impossible for me not to take them personally. He's like, I don't watch new horror movies. I just have no interest in them whatsoever. I've never seen Pearl. I'm not ever going to see Maxine. I just have no interest in that sort of stuff. Okay. Now, if I'm Ty West, I may be like, all right, man, maybe. I'll tell you what, I think
Longlegs, I would go as far to say is a masterpiece. The other movie I've seen of his is Black Coat's Daughter is fine.
I haven't seen, so
It's
I
fine.
did not get a chance to review any of his previous
Yeah.
films. Um, this
But if you're
movie,
gonna throw shade, it's good that you are doing that alongside a masterpiece.
I
But
mean, I understand that I'm well
yeah,
outside of, I am outside of the kind of accepted opinion on these movies. I had never seen X or Pearl, and I watched them
okay.
both like 2 weeks ago with the mind to go see Maxine. Thought X was a like X is in my
I
opinion
haven't
is
seen yet.
X in my opinion is kind of like a genre pastiche of like very intentionally, by the way, of a like ladder horror sequel.
I was about to say, isn't it supposed to be like a sleazy horror slasher?
It is. It's
Yeah.
but like that's the thing is that it's trying to be like Texas Chainsaw 3 or Friday the
Okay.
13th 5, and that it's just like we all know the setup, we all know what's going to happen to him, we
Yeah.
all know the creepy old people are, part of the danger there. And that movie is like fine, and I
Okay.
like it. Pearl, I think, is like an actually atrociously put together movie.
Oh, okay.
It's I think that like it's got my least favorite trope of all time, which is the trademark A24. I'm going to look directly at the camera and I
Oh,
am going to, in a 10-minute monologue, state what the movie's themes are, hold your hand, and tell you exactly how I, the character, am feeling so that you don't have to go home feeling any ambiguity about what's going on.
well,
I
I talked about it
cannot
before,
stand
and
that trope. I
my
hate
least
it.
favorite trope is the 30 minutes of I don't believe you in
I
a
mean,
horror
that
film.
can be like frustrating
Yeah.
in a movie like a horror, like a slasher sequel. I'm like, that's just a fun convention of like when the cops are like,
If it
shut
lasts,
up.
if it lasts for like 2 minutes,
Yes.
sure. But if it's like if you're spending an entire act on that, that
No.
happens.
And how Longlegs sidesteps that
Yes.
really well is like when you get to the point where the person of authority is going to tell you, I'm sick of your shit. You don't agree with him because we as the audience have more information than he does.
Yeah.
But you do get where he's coming from.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you're like, so our only lead just killed himself in custody. So, by the way, you're cut off. We're not doing this anymore. Like
Yeah.
you get to that point and you're like, I don't agree with it. I do get it.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there more on Oz Perkins throwing shade?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So and he's not getting into it the way that I am.
Okay.
But his movie sidesteps a lot of those things. It doesn't ever explain it to you. The movie that Pearl is a deeply self-conscious movie that I think really it's so desperate for the audience to like it. Longlegs, to a like commendable fuck you degree, does not care if the movie likes it, agrees with it, or understands it. And all the information is there so that if you are watching attentively,
the audience, if they don't like it.
Yes.
Gotcha.
The information is all there. So if you want to understand it, all the information is there for you to piece together.
Mm-hmm.
It just never holds your hand and spells it out in the way something like Pearl does.
Okay.
But in that same interview, Perkins talks about how he makes movies that he considers horror movie. He doesn't shy away from the genre in some sort of like kind of genre snobbery the way some directors will.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard John Carpenter give interviews where he's like, oh, well, I used to hang out with Cronenberg and now I don't because, he went on to go make more prestigious stuff while the rest of us just made garbage schlock, and that's a very John Carpenter sort of like chip on his shoulder thing. But
I like Blake Cronenberg stuff too.
It's not that I don't like that stuff.
It's different. I like it.
Yeah, but it's like it is. I want to. I'll get into this a little bit when I finish talking about like how modern horror is perceived and what quote unquote good horror has to do to be considered a good horror movie.
Let's go.
Right before I want to touch on Oz Perkins talked about. He's like, I have this weird relationship to horror movies because like by the time I was old enough to understand them, Psycho was already this like classic mainstay. It was a genre defining thing. And when I was young, what were horror movies to me? They were the things that my dad left me to go make in Europe or something, like I that's what I think of them. I can't watch them without thinking about the fact that like, and then I would watch them and they'd be shit. And I didn't like them. Like I was like, I didn't have my dad for age 11 because you were making this thing. And at the end of the day, the product sucks ass. It's not good.
Yeah.
So
that connection with his dad, do you think really influenced the father figure thing in Longlegs?
I think that he is. I always hate projecting onto real life people
Yeah,
because
of
the thing is
course.
that like someone who has a father can make a story about a father
Yeah.
that does not necessarily inform his own relationship with that father. It could just be about his thoughts on fatherhood in general.
Oh, it could be.
So I don't
Is he a father? I don't know.
I don't,
Yeah.
but maybe like adult relationships to father
Mhm.
is what I mean. So I don't want to psychoanalyze Oz
Yeah, of
Perkins
course.
because that just feels it's just not what I'm here to do.
I mean, I'll go
You know.
as far to say is like everyone's dad sucks and has the potential to be a monster.
I think this movie's primary argument is everyone's dad sucks a little bit. The best dad in the world
yeah,
kind of
is not as good as the worst mom.
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, you just repeated basically verbatim an old Louis C.K. bit.
Oh, did I? Oh, I hate him. Damn it. Oh, right.
I didn't
Parallel thinking.
I
then.
didn't walk you into it.
All right.
But I didn't like pull the leash back when I saw it happening.
I guess it's parallel thinking. Then. Jeez. All right.
I want to talk a little bit about this movie's presence in what I would call like a long, in which, funnily enough, long legs. Funnily enough, Micah Monroe is part of one of the first movies that kind of establishes this modern trend in horror, which is It Follows, is kind of one of the first big, oh my God, this is a good horror movie. And it's like it's prestigious and well made. And
most
there's
importantly, cheap.
Yes,
Most
it
importantly.
is this kind of willful ignorance of like the pageant of horror history
Mhm.
to say that, you know, in 2015 or whatever, A24 Neon, who made Long Legs,
Yeah.
kind of invented what we now refer to as prestige horror, which is like which is minimizing the like legitimate craft in 70s and 80s and 90s horror.
But I mean, it's to get away from the conception that horror is all about blood and boobies.
Yes, that's the thing, is that it is a little bit of, I compare it to like the grim, dark post Nolan superhero movies where they're like, because you think about what was like being done in superhero movies before that. You have the Raimi movies, which are great on the whole, but they're very silly and goofy, like in tone. You have and then the thing is, most of the other movies are both silly and shitty. So you have like the Fantastic Four movies. You have
some of the X-Men.
You have
stuff,
Daredevil.
Yeah.
You have
oh god, I forgot
you have
about
basically any X-Men movie after X2.
Yeah,
is like this stuff that like doesn't take it seriously, and people who want to cling to that genre, like that thing they loved as a kid, but they want the validation that this is actually for adults. I'm not a baby for liking this thing anymore. And it's a similar thing you see in horror where it's like, well, I don't just watch like video store trash. I watch like real movies, And so you have people like Robert Eggers and Ari Aster who have capitalized on that movement in horror and kind of grown to define it with, by the way, I like all their movies.
Yeah.
I like all of Ari Aster's movies. I like all of Robert, and I fucking love Jordan Peele hasn't made a movie worse than a 10 out of 10, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing, is I'm not saying these movies aren't excellent.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I think some of the way that we talk about them is discounting the work, like the movies that laid the groundwork for these movies to be as good as they are.
Because like it's going in implying that horror is an inferior genre.
Yes. And I mean,
it is what, like, if an important factor of art is to bring some kind of connection and emotion out of your audience, horror is one of the best ones for that when done well. Viewing it as a low art form is a little insulting to some of my favorite kind of movies.
No,
but I'm also the kind of person that'll be like, I don't watch trash like Friday the 13th Part 3. I like good stuff like Friday the 13th Part 4.
Yeah. I mean, like,
I'm also that guy. So.
Yeah. I mean, the gap in quality between those two movies is quite large.
Yes.
But like when you really think about the production of them, they didn't set out with that much difference in intent.
Yeah.
But
I'm
like,
just making a silly
but
joke.
the thing is that Jordan Peele himself, when he after Nope had come out, he did he did a director program series at Film at Lincoln Center,
Mhm.
where he talked about like influences for Nope, and in there was like the original King Kong, like a lot of like old monster Wizard of Oz, because there's kind of this like mythic storytelling to it.
Yeah.
But in there was Friday the 13th Part 4, which played at Lincoln Center, which was a really fun way to see that movie, honestly. So the thing is that the best of
see
these
it, I could see it,
auteurs do not discount them for their lack of prestige,
Yeah.
basically. And I think that's why those movies are so good, is because the people actually making them understand the roots of the genre and what those movies provide that will allow their movies to be similarly effective.
Mhm.
The thing I want to talk about this movie addressing that I think all of the other quote unquote modern prestige horror movies don't handle as well
Mhm.
is trauma.
Family trauma.
Yeah, family
Yeah.
trauma, because I mean, if you've seen
Intergenerational trauma.
the Scream reboot, which is infuriatingly titled just Scream,
Yeah.
that I often call Five Cream, because
We talked about 7 before. I often call it the 7 and
it's a 7 and yeah. But anyway, in Five Cream, like during the phone call scene with Jenna Ortega and Ghostface, and they do the what's your favorite scary movie bit, and she's like, oh, I love the Babadook. I just think it's this wonderful exploration of motherhood and generational trauma. And it's no.
Funny.
That is a really
That's what it is.
That is a really one. It is an accurate
good reading.
description of a very good movie that does those things quite ably.
Yeah.
But it's skewering the fact that we've gotten so highfalutin about what a horror movie is and what we're allowed to consider to be a good horror movie.
What is the turning point? Because it could be It Follows, but I think Hereditary was really the turning point. Where
Hereditary,
I
think that is the 1-2 punch. You know what? I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's those two coming in pretty close tandem to each other.
Yeah.
And then I feel like the one that made it this really widespread phenomenon is actually it's Get Out.
Yeah.
And I think it's and I think it's this is a couple years later. I think it's Midsommar.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the two that like make this, that like quote unquote normies know about.
Right around the same time, you're still having like dread movies where it wasn't like very much. I mean, things are going to be about something, but a movie I love a lot is Green Room. Have you seen Green Room?
I've not seen Green Room.
Green Room is a horror film.
Is this the Anton Yelchin one?
It's his last performance.
Yeah, with Patrick Kelly.
I don't remember. Patrick Stewart's in it.
Okay.
But anyway, it's a movie where it's like 90 minutes of I'm stuck in this room and there's a really scary guy on the other side of the door, and it's terrifying at points. And like that one, it's like it doesn't feel like that's not a movie that it does say something. It's Nazis are bad. That's what the
fine. I mean, I agree.
It's an agreeable thing to say. But it doesn't really say anything about like trauma or anything like too deep besides this is a scary thing that's happening and our characters are in a scary situation.
And I mean,
and it's great still, but like I don't think a movie always has to have something very deep behind it. But I think the focus on that and separating that from really decades of influential work is a little insulting. I know it's lower budget stuff, but it doesn't mean it's worse.
It's a kind of genre elitism where like I always think of Terry Pratchett, the author of the Discworld novels, wonderful British kind of comic writer. He, not long after J.K. Rowling had said, like, I don't really think of my books as fantasy novels, and his like wonderful quote is like, I guess I was tricked by like the witches and the witchcraft. Like I guess I'm dumb because I saw like witches and magic and I thought, oh, maybe this is fantasy. And there's this embarrassing kind of this distance to get away from. Stephen King is like, he wrote a whole book about how he's like, I don't need to be embarrassed about the fact that I write horror. Yeah. And just because your books go in the quote unquote fiction section and my books go in the quote unquote horror section doesn't mean that what you write is any more impactful and can say anything. Conversely, I think the intent to be perceived as having said something important to the degree that have you seen Jojo Rabbit?
I've seen Jojo Rabbit.
I detest Jojo Rabbit.
Okay.
I cannot stand that movie. and it's because
It's another Nazis are bad movie.
well, it is it, but like
Because they are.
it wants a lot of credit for coming up with that. Similar to
Yeah.
my least favorite movie of all time, Vice, the movie
Okay.
that bravely states Dick Cheney bad, which is like, wow, asshole, how'd you come up with that one? That movie is like, if you really, I don't
Mhm.
like the tone of Jojo Rabbit because it's like, if you really think about it,
Yeah.
Hitler was pretty bad, and I'm like, it was best
Yeah.
exemplified when I was walking to the theater after seeing it. I saw two guys who were like just talking to each other afterwards. He's like, "Whoa, he was like bad the whole time," and I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
but like from the second you see him in costume as Hitler, I'm like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't need to realize that afterwards. We all have the cultural knowledge of what he looks like." That movie spells things out to you to, I think, an insulting degree.
Yeah.
Um,
That's fair.
and that's to circle it all back to Longlegs.
Yeah.
I really appreciate being given the credit as an audience member.
Mm-hmm.
To not have to have all that spelled out for me like a dummy.
Yeah.
And I think we are finally getting to a place where we've had enough more kind of like bluntly on theme horror movies
Yeah.
that have hit mainstream success that now Longlegs, despite being more oblique in its interpretations, is able to achieve mainstream success. It's doing very well.
So
Like pseudo unexpectedly.
I'm thinking about this too. I think it's a cultural thing, like maybe worldwide too. Maybe not everywhere, because like some places in the world, I'm sure have like really distinct. Like I've seen a lot of really great Japanese horror films.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking of like, what Italian horror films are called? They're called film giallo, which means yellow movies.
Mhm.
And the reason why they're
I
called
thought giallo referred to a specific type of
giallo
horror.
literally means yellow.
Okay.
And the reason why it's yellow is historical, because horror novels and horror literature was traditionally printed on shittier paper.
Oh, so it's like a pulp, basically.
It's a pulp. It's
yes.
exactly. It's pulp paper.
Yes.
It's just printed on this shitty yellow paper because it was a lesser art form.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know like why that's so culturally. I don't know if it's like, I don't know how widespread culturally that is, but like seeing there is an elitism against horror.
There is this
that
weird,
I don't like.
There's this weird resentment towards like, because it's especially in the case of the pulps, and I guess also with giallos.
Yeah.
Where like the idea that it's printed on this cheaper paper so that it can be printed in greater quantities and sold at cheaper prices so that a greater variety of people can buy it.
Yeah.
The fact that a large audience enjoys
they
this
printed
thing.
Dickens like that, for God's sake.
Yeah. And it's very interesting to see what is allowed to be canonized as a classic.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you like talk about just like film history, what are the like if you looked at like the average person's conception of what are the 100 greatest films, The Exorcist probably is going to sneak in there.
Yeah.
There's maybe one or two other like but even like something like Halloween is not going to make that on there because I mean that one's prestige has been damaged a little bit by just sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel.
Okay. That's fine.
But which is like, fine. But I think that there's this kind of I'm a little sad that we've all decided that like we're collectively too good for the simple pleasures, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, the behemoths of it are kind of like gone. We haven't seen a Friday the 13th movie in is it 13? Oh wait, it's not 13 years. It's 15 years. It's
15 years.
Okay,
now,
so
wow.
we passed it. What's funny is there's 12 of them. They had right down the middle, right down the plate.
Yeah, they
could make Friday the 13th 13.
Yeah.
Friday the 13th movie.
If they're allowed to call it that. I know there's like a whole
There's
thing
weird.
behind that. Yeah.
Do you know the like weird announcement?
Someone owns the name Jason. Someone owns the name Friday the 13th. Something like that.
So they've decided to like the Platinum Dunes, Michael Bay's production company.
Yeah.
That owns the right to, I think, the name Friday the 13th and some.
We gotta have a score sheet of how many times we mentioned Friday the 13th in these podcast episodes, because I feel like it's at least 50% of the time I'm on here we're talking about Friday the 13th.
The thing is that like it's the one that you kind of
but not also grossly influential.
It's not the most.
That's my point.
Yes, it's not the most. That's the thing is that like even unconsciously,
don't care if they're cheap.
Yeah. No, I mean like the fact that they're cheap is like is kind of a selling point and why they were able to become so prolific.
Yeah.
Because it was allowed to become a 12 movie series where there's so much that people are like, oh, that would be a fun thing to like kind of marathon and run through.
Yeah.
And it's because like half of the time they're like, we'll give you 25 grand to go out into the woods and
Yeah.
shoot something. And half the time they'd come back and they were like,
But this is why
I don't know if this
I
is
think this is why we're starting to see horror films that are more brainy and considered to be more widely acceptable to like, and more just seem more prestige behind the horror genre lately. Is the people who are coming around and they want to make what's good horror films. They are very, very good movies, but they are influenced by the time they snuck into a video store and got a Friday the 13th video
yeah.
and showed it to all of
I
their
mean,
friends when they
this
were a kid.
this sort of like influence
Yeah.
over a movie is at the basis of like why I was interested in starting this type of podcast, because I was like, the circumstances in which you watch a movie, the way you were introduced to it, and what you are bringing to it via your experience
Yeah.
and your like perspective thus far
Mhm.
is almost more influential than the actual text of the movie in many cases.
Yeah.
There are like I've talked infinitely about the movie Guess Who, a movie that
Yeah.
movie that nobody like half the time they're like
It's for your bad first impression bingo card right
yeah,
there.
bad first impression being called Friday the 13th, Guess Who. But no, like you talk about Guess Who, a kind of kind of just totally forgotten remake,
Of
race
Guess Who's
swapped
Coming to
remake
Dinner, yeah.
of a like classic that like for me became foundational
Mhm.
because for no other reason than my parents bought it at a discount DVD bin, and my sister had a fixation with it, and it was on in the house to the point that I got a fixation with it. And I've
Mhm.
seen that movie maybe more than any other movie.
Yeah.
And that informs that's the first movie I ever watched where I was like, I'm not saying I didn't see movies before it that had like good scores or like good, structures or side characters. That's the first movie that I saw so much
Yeah.
that I had to start thinking about like, oh, it's weird how like score can swell with the tone of the scene.
Mhm.
And I've watched that movie by the way as an adult, and I'm like, it's not very much. It's so funny that like a
Yeah.
movie, it's not even a particularly bad movie. It's not as offensive as you'd expect it to be.
Mhm.
It's not great, but it's not. It's there are moments where you're like, ugh, but like
Yeah.
it's mostly just that I'm like, there's just kind of nothing here.
Mhm.
And I think that's the same thing that you're talking about. What did you grab from the video store? What did you
Yeah.
have on your DVD shelf?
Yeah.
And what got you
Well, it's
at this young age? And this plays into the themes of the movie is what got you
Yeah.
at your young age.
This
What
is the
snuck in there?
this is why I think that's a legitimate comparison. Is in this case, this is the movie that I snuck from a friend or I got from the video store. I don't want my parents to know I'm watching this.
Yes.
I'm watching it in the dark on a shitty VCR.
And
And-
that's and this is like maybe
Yeah.
like a improper conclusion I'm drawing right now.
Yeah.
But that impulse to watch something on your like shitty VCR in your 13-inch TV screen,
Yeah.
In your room that your parents begrudgingly let you have, even though they thought they probably shouldn't have allowed you to have,
Yeah.
watching an R-rated movie, maybe that the kind of like forbiddenness of that is what we're chasing when we have an obsession with true crime, and our need to place a neat narrative over it coalesces with our desire to look at things that upset us.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a movie about weird fixations and the imprints our parents make on us.
Yeah.
Like that kind of in weird spiderwebbing ways influence those fixations.
it's the meta of horror films right now is make it about family trauma, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I love about this movie is this whole long tangent that we've gone on about trauma, how it's gone on in other like modern prestige
I'm
horror
glad we got
movies.
the influence thing out because that's important. That's
Yes.
been bugging me.
Yeah. There is a lot of like schlock in the influence of this movie, and I think this movie wears it not proudly but not ashamedly.
No.
Like it's not like
I was expecting it to be a bloodbath, and it's not a it's not a gory film.
I
There's no
think
slasher elements in it.
I mean that's
That's what I was expecting.
I walk out of it after having it advertised to me as like it's gonna be like fucking Cabin in the Woods, just blood shooting everywhere.
Yeah.
I walk out of it and I'm like, it's so funny that they said it was gonna be that and that it wasn't. I think this movie is also in many times trying to be very fun and succeeding. Like I like that about it.
There are some very funny scenes.
Before we can like touch on stray thoughts on Longlegs. Are there any other like big things that we didn't touch on?
In
We didn't
Longlegs,
really
yeah.
talk about Kiernan Shipka, who is kind of the one red herring in this movie.
Kiernan Shipka's not in this movie, is she?
Kiernan Shipka is in this movie.
Where's she in this
She
movie?
is the
Is she the girl in the hospital?
She's the girl in the hospital. Yeah,
That's her.
that's Kiernan Shipka.
She was in the.
She's
I didn't even realize.
She's a previous collaborator of.
I saw
of Oz
her.
Perkins.
She's in the Black Coat's daughter, and she's
Yep.
great in that movie. I didn't even recognize her.
Yeah,
and that's the thing too. Is like, I know like Nic Cage is like one of the most recognizable actors in the world, but it's like, I am coming into this having seen 120 something Nic Cage movies, and he doesn't look like Nic Cage in this movie. And I wonder,
even a little tiny bit.
I wonder if you didn't know it was Nic Cage, if that would go over your head, and you weren't just, I don't know. If my dad
the thing
saw
is that
this
like
movie,
you'd have to be
my
like,
dad doesn't know.
You'd have to
Nic
be
Cage
like,
is.
you can never see a commercial for it. You'd have to. You know what's like the funniest thing about we keep talking. Nic Cage to me. I was telling you a little bit about this earlier. I'll say on camera. When I was growing up, my mother, shout out mom, my mother used to talk about Nic Cage. She's like, he is the sexiest man alive. Like, and this is when I was like a teenager. So
have you ever seen Valley Girl?
I've never seen Valley
He's
Girl.
Smoking hot.
So my mother's about 60 years old. So she would have been a young woman enjoying things.
Yeah, she would have been like 18, 19 when
Valley Girl
came out. Yeah.
Moonstruck.
Yeah.
I doubt my mother's ever seen Wild at Heart, but mom, if you've never seen Wild at Heart, you should go watch it.
Masterpiece, yeah. Top 5.
These are movies where Nicolas Cage,
The Boy in Blue, is another one that no one's ever seen. Same time period.
These movies where he is a little cutie pie.
Yeah.
He's a sexy little piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And to see it's so funny that my mom would say it then, because she was saying it about like Nic Cage
when National Treasure was out.
Like this, arguably the best he looks is in the first National Treasure.
He looks great in Ghost Rider too.
When his hairpiece is not as bad.
Yeah.
Like that's like his National Treasure 2 hairpiece.
Oh yeah,
the most embarrassing.
Around the same time that Next came out, which is the most infamous hairpiece. That's the one where around that time, if you ever saw the photoshopped picture of Nic Cage where his hair is turned into a bird, that's from the movie Next. And his hair looks like a bird in that whole movie, where he's got it's just like
it looks. I mean, like I feel like Bad Lieutenant is kind of in like the same pocket of time. In that one, like the receding hairline, it works. It's for him to look. But like that's the thing is like him having like a bad hairpiece. I'm like that feels like an intentional part of the story. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny to see him like repeatedly challenge my mother's conception of him as a sex symbol.
Yeah.
By like, this is maybe the movie that my mother might find most offensive in terms of enjoying Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. I mean, I described him as looking like the monster from Terror at 40,000 Feet.
Yes. Yeah. Which like the thing is, you're not
wrong.
No, I think this is a fantastic performance. Is there any other like big stuff we want to touch on before we start? There's a couple other like items of business I just want to touch on about.
We can wrap things.
Cool. So if you have stray thoughts, go ahead and interrupt, because this hasn't exactly been a streamlined focused podcast thus far.
Yeah, that's fine.
But okay. So one, we did this as kind of the inaugural, we're going to cover Nic Cage movies.
Yes.
Let's talk about things that are on the horizon right now. One movie that is technically received, like it's out, it's completed. It's a movie called The Surfer. I believe it was at Cannes.
Yeah.
I was paying attention to Cannes updates, and I have not heard a single fucking thing about this
Which
movie.
Cannes was it at? That's a film festival.
The most recent one.
No, that's a film festival. There are 14 different film festivals called Cannes.
Oh, are they really?
It's just the name of a city, so you could just call your film festival Cannes Film Festival.
Honestly, it could
it's
be
what Neil Breen does.
It could be one of the minor ones.
So
genuinely.
Neil Breen movies are premiered at Cannes. He doesn't say which one.
Yeah.
That's the joke.
So, there's The Surfer. It's just labeled as like a thriller. It doesn't
I don't know anything about it.
I don't know anything about it. It doesn't seem like a movie that anybody is in a particular rush to get an American release date.
Yeah, well, that's what happened with Butcher's Crossing, and that one's just okay.
Yeah, so if that movie comes out, I guess we'll cover it.
If it's worth, yeah.
The another thing that is undated, we have talked before about how Nicolas Cage has only done a handful of sequels. He may be adding to that pile soon with a Lords plural of War, the sequel to Lord of War.
I'm so interested to see how you make a sequel to Lord of War.
with Bill Skarsgård in
Yeah.
it. That's undated, but theoretically shot end of last year, so we might get a release date on that sometime soon. The one that we are most likely to revisit is actually like arguably Nicolas Cage is an even smaller part of than he is in Longlegs, is the third Spider-Verse movie.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Well, because it's a TV
Covering
show,
that
yeah.
movie, covering that movie
Would you rather just talk about the TV show where he plays the same character?
Here's the thing. If that so supposedly he is reprising his role as Spider-Man Noir in a live action TV show.
Incredible.
Here's what I'm
decision.
going to tell
Yeah.
you. I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think
Yeah,
that, like
I know.
I doubt that project is happening.
You're having Nic Cage play Spider-Man. It's like the two things that I love most about movies, and it doesn't happen. I will be very disappointed.
It's if it happens.
Yeah.
Honestly, here's the thing. We've done it in the past, and we're too ill-advised effect doing it in the future. I don't know about covering TV.
Yeah.
If it's 6 or 8 episodes, maybe you could twist my arm into doing that.
I don't watch anything more than 12 anymore, pretty much.
Yeah, but because it's not even just that like I have to watch a lot.
Let's not get on that tangent.
No. We're talking about the future of this.
Recommend the short anime to me in the future.
Yeah. I feel like I don't want to commit to that much of like homework, frankly, for a given. But at the same time, I'm sometimes like I just don't feel like I can give 8 to 10 hours of content enough, like discussion in what is usually about a 2-hour show. So that one's backburnered heavy, maybe. I'd have to see a really interesting trailer or see some really interesting talent attached to it to be totally persuaded by that. But it's not a no.
Okay.
So I don't know how you feel about that.
We'll see how it goes.
Well, it's not like you won't be back. You're like the perpetual gremlin of this podcast. You're just like, you're like the what's the
You just
snot
try
monster?
to keep me away.
Yeah.
What?
The snot monster, unfortunately voiced by TJ Miller. He's the
I don't even know this
from
character.
the commercial. I don't know.
Oh, the Mucinex commercial?
The Mucinex commercial. You're like the Mucinex guy who keeps just coming back. Please come back. We always love having you. I'll do my best not to call other guests snot in the future. We might cut all of that out.
You're gonna bring on Carrie Ann and tell her how much she reminds you of the Noid.
Yeah, I'm like Carrie Ann. So you're piss. Okay, cool. Bye. No. So we'll. Here's the thing. Should we cover the third Spider-Verse movie as a Nicolas Cage movie?
It's not.
You're saying
that's
definite
not a Nick Cage
no.
movie. That's not. A
You
Nick
don't
Cage
think
movie.
so? But
no. It's a movie with Nic Cage in it. Like he's in the Flash, which I saw. He's on screen for 2 seconds, and it's not even him. It's a computer generated face that's just his likeness.
Well, and
I had to watch it.
That's a different scenario, I would say. Well, let me tell you this, Campo.
Yeah.
You didn't have to. Nobody was making you watch it. You didn't have to do any.
I couldn't watch
99%. I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
But in here's the difference between this and the Spider-Man and the Flash.
Yeah.
The Flash was like a cameo that presumably was not announced beforehand. It was an after the fact, he's in it.
Yeah.
As a reference to Superman Lives, a movie that
unfortunately never happened.
Yeah. Honestly, probably was never close to actually happening. Like, I don't think so. I don't think Nic Cage as Superman with fighting giant mechanical spiders was ever going to happen. I would have loved
it, but everyone else would have hated it.
Everyone except for John Peters.
Yeah.
This is a movie where he's reprising a character.
Very rare, yeah.
He's coming. This is but he has like a named character who he's returning to, who is announced ahead of time. So I don't know. I guess here's what I'd throw out to you. I don't think we should say definitely no.
Okay.
We'll
see how important.
If you want to have ongoing conversations leading up to it,
let's talk.
I think that's fine.
Let's talk.
But I think that like we've talked about, because this would be a nice maybe little like preface to it. He's only done 4 sequels.
About 4. He did Ghost Rider, Croods. There's
National Treasure.
National Treasure. There's one that's technically a sequel, but it also doesn't matter. There's a movie called Arsenal, which is kind of a sequel to Deadfall. Where
is he in Deadfall?
He's in Deadfall and Arsenal. He plays the same character, but same named character. His brother directed Deadfall. His brother is in Arsenal, and it's supposed to be the same character. It makes absolutely no sense how the movies are related to each other whatsoever. But
Well,
technically, it's kind of a blessing, a sequel that got the blessing of the original director.
yeah. Okay. So we can maybe
But I would
toss
like
around ideas because
talk about
the
that.
thing is I would love to talk about previous Cage. Like I'd love to
Yeah.
I obviously cannot devote 10 years to covering
Yeah,
one week at a time
No,
every
please,
Nic
no.
Cage movie. But maybe we could like find ways to like find little capsules, like
Yeah.
themes around like movies he've done in the future. But it's just an idea to throw out there, and that might be a good preface for him returning in a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
If we get to it and it's like, oh, it's like a cameo, then whatever, then we won't do it.
Mm.
But that's I think it for inside baseball discussion
Sure.
of movies that don't have firm release dates that we might cover one day.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to touch on about Longlegs, about Nicolas Cage, any other upcoming projects that I haven't named?
I'm actually trying to not know as much. I do this for like really any movie whatsoever. And I'm glad that the marketing for Longlegs is doing this, but I try to know as little about any movie I'm seeing before
Yeah.
I go into it. So for The Surfer, I know he's in it, and I know that the name of the movie is The Surfer. That's about
It
it.
is listed as like a thriller.
Sure.
Cool, great.
Yeah, it's a Nic Cage movie. Sure, it's going to be a thriller. Sure. That's about all I know, and that's what I try to know going into these kind of
Okay.
movies. So I actually don't know what else is on the horizon besides those two. Right now.
It's that
Lords of War and
an
Spider-Man. Yeah.
undated Lords of War and Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Which are all like it feels like if Lords
If
of
he
War
does actually retire from films, I'll be very sad about it.
if
but
Lords of
Lords of
War
War cannot be his last
if
one.
Lords of War happens,
Yeah.
we'll probably almost definitely do that one, it sounds like.
Yeah.
The others are all the Spider-Man Noir series, the Spider-Man movie, and the Surfer all sound closer to maybes. They might fall in Arcadian territory.
I also think he also sounds like he wants to end on a really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like he wants like I think he wishes that Pig was his last movie. That's what it feels like to me. He's like, I wish I ended on something good like Pig.
I like this movie more than Pig.
I like this movie more than Pig too. And if
I like Longlegs way more than Pig.
Yeah, if like maybe I don't know if Longlegs were the last movie he was in, he'd probably be very happy about
that. Would be a really interesting way to go out.
He is a very dramatic and theatrical kind of guy. So like trying to end on a bang like Longlegs, if this did, it's not going to be, but if this were his last movie, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
It'd be what he would want.
I think we kind of beat the shit out of Longlegs. I think we got. I think I teased out all of my thoughts on it. Now, what's lovely about it is that I'm going to probably watch it again within the next week and have more thoughts on it then. But like that's the thing is that I'll just continue to having more thoughts.
This is initial viewing, and we'll see how right we are.
That being said, Alex, as always, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Despite my calling you a snot monster played by an alleged sex offender.
Yeah.
You're always a pleasure. I especially am glad to have you in your element talking about Nic Cage. Do you have anything that you want to plug? Usually.
Oh yeah, I can give you the latest project.
What's going on?
A project that I worked on. I was the editor and colorist for a music video by the band Midnight Machines. I teased it in a previous episode. It's actually out now. It took a little while.
You know what's so funny is that previous episode was filmed earlier.
Yeah.
It's gonna come out a couple weeks from now.
Did that not happen? No, I think I did. I mention an American movie? Maybe I don't know where I mentioned it, but
I believe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
whatever.
you are guesting on one of our Lord of the Rings episodes.
Yeah.
And you I think you.
Oh no, I mentioned Pizza Dreams on that because it's mixed media, but this is a music video. It just came out, and it'll still be new when this episode comes out. But it's fun. It's just a fun fight scene that we got between two Olympic fencers.
Yeah.
Stuff. This is a very fun project to work on.
Yeah.
It's public. It's available. I'll send you the link to.
Perfect. We'll post it on the channel as well. Anything else? No stray thoughts. Nothing else to plug. Well, with that
being said, hail Satan.
I need to do my outro.
Oh yeah, do your outro.
I'm so sorry. With that being said, this has been Bad First Impression. If you like the show, please remember to rate, review, subscribe on your podcast of choice. Please like, comment, and follow on YouTube. I think I got all those verbs correct. Make sure leave us positive reviews, leave us comments about what you think about the show, about things you'd like to see us cover, about just like maybe like if there's questions you want us to talk about, we do have, you can either message us directly on social media. Of course, you can mail us at mailbag@bfipod.com. You can find us on all socials at bfipod and on TikTok at bfipodofficial, because as my ongoing battle with TikTok continues to rage, they without warning banned our original account. So remember to go follow at bfipodofficial. And to you, TikTok, here's what I have to say. We'll see who's around in 6 months.
Yeah.
I am your host, Devin Warner. You can find me also on all socials at What If Devin. With that being said, we could go out with, well, here's the thing. Do we put a fine point on it and go out on the line that the movie goes out on? Or do we go out on the line that the movie starts with, that you and I were talking about before we recorded?
Oh, we didn't even talk about
We
that.
didn't even talk about that line.
Please touch on that real quick.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what the hell it means. I don't know what that line means.
I just think it's meant to be unnerving.
Yeah. So the line is.
So until next time, I forgot to put my long legs on.
To put my long legs on.
I forgot to put my long legs on?
I don't know. Hail Satan.
Yeah. That one we can do. Until next time, hail Satan. Bye, y'all. Christ.